Story 1.
I trusted my neighbor for 6 years. I let his kids play in my garden. I ate his burgers every August, drank his cheap lager, and told him he was a good bloke. And the entire time, he was stealing from my family, including the medication that keeps my daughter alive. My name's Craig. I'm 43. I live in a cul-de-sac in North Leeds, one of those quiet estates where the houses all look the same and the bins go out on Tuesday. It's the kind of place where you leave your car unlocked, where parcels sit on the step for hours because nobody would ever touch them. Or so I thought. It started with something small. An Amazon parcel, a phone case for my wife, maybe 12 quid. Tracking said delivered, but it wasn't on the step when I got home. I shrugged it off. Happens, doesn't it? Driver marks it delivered early, drops it at the wrong house. I filed a claim, got a refund, forgot about it. Then it happened again. And again. Over the next few months, maybe 5 or 6 packages went missing. Some got refunded, some didn't. My wife started getting frustrated. I started blaming the delivery drivers. Royal Mail, Hermes, DPD, I was convinced they were all useless. But here's the thing that changed everything. My daughter Ellie is 11. She's type 1 diabetic. She's been on insulin since she was 4. We get her supplies delivered, insulin pens, test strips, glucose monitors, the lot. It comes through a pharmacy delivery service, usually every 2 weeks. One Thursday in March last year, the delivery didn't arrive. I called the pharmacy. They said it had been delivered at 2:15 in the afternoon and signed for... I asked them to send me the signature. They did. It wasn't mine. It wasn't my wife's. It was a scribble, barely legible, but it looked like someone had written, C. Hargreaves. That's my surname, except I was at work and my wife was picking Ellie up from school. Someone had walked up to my door, taken my daughter's insulin delivery, and signed for it using a version of my name. That's when I stopped blaming the postman. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. Not my wife, not my mates, nobody. I went online, bought a small wireless camera, the kind that looks like a doorbell, and mounted it above the front door angled to cover the full driveway and the path from the street. I also bought a second one, a tiny little thing, and hid it in the hedge that runs between our property and next door. The hedge belongs to both of us, me and my neighbor Darren. Darren Whitworth. 41. Football coach for the under-12s at the local club. The kind of bloke everyone likes. Always out front, washing his car, always waving, always got time for a chat. His wife Paula runs a cake stall at the school fair. Their son plays with Ellie sometimes. We've been to their barbecues every summer since we moved in. I had absolutely zero reason to suspect him. The first week nothing happened. No deliveries went missing, nothing on camera. I almost took them down. Then on day 9, I ordered a pair of trainers. Tracking said out for delivery. I watched the live feed from my phone at work. At 1:47 in the afternoon, the DPD driver walked up, left the parcel by the door, and drove off. At 1:53, 6 minutes later, I watched Darren walk through the gap in the hedge, look both ways, pick up the parcel, and walk back through the hedge into his garden. Calm as anything, like he was picking up his own post. I felt my stomach drop. I didn't confront him. Not yet. I wanted more. Over the next 3 weeks, I ordered small items, cheap stuff, things I didn't need, books, cables, a kitchen timer. I staggered the deliveries across different days and times. Darren took 4 out of 7. Always the same routine. He'd wait a few minutes. After the driver left, check the street, come through the hedge, grab it, and disappear. He never rushed. He never looked nervous. He'd clearly been doing this for a very long time. Then I found the rest of it. I started checking online marketplaces, eBay, Facebook Marketplace, Vinted. I searched for items I knew had been delivered to my address and gone missing over the past 2 years. And there they were. A Bluetooth speaker I'd ordered for my wife's birthday, sold on eBay by a seller called DW Bargains. A set of resistance bands. A kid's science kit I'd bought for Ellie's Christmas stocking. All listed, all sold, all from the same account. The profile picture was a Leeds United badge, but the postage location was our postcode. It was Darren. He wasn't just taking my stuff on impulse. He was running an operation. He was taking deliveries, checking what was inside, keeping what was valuable, and reselling the rest. The forged signatures, the timing, the hedge, he'd mapped the whole thing out. I sat in my car outside the house for 20 minutes that night, engine off, just staring at his front window. His kids were watching telly. I could see the blue light flickering. Paula walked past the window carrying a mug. And I thought, do I call the police? Do I knock on his door? Do I burn the whole thing down? Because here's what kept eating at me. He took Ellie's insulin. He signed for it. He knew what it was. The box says it right on the label, temperature-sensitive medical supply. And he took it anyway. My daughter could have gone into a crisis. She nearly did that night because we had to scramble to get emergency supplies from the hospital pharmacy at 9 o'clock at night while Ellie cried because she was scared. And the whole time it was sitting in Darren's house, or in the bin, or sold to God knows who. I chose to confront him first. I don't know why. Maybe because part of me still couldn't believe it. Maybe because I wanted to see his face. I went over on a Saturday morning. Paula was out. His kids were at football practice, ironic since he was supposed to be coaching. I knocked. He opened the door in a tracksuit, coffee in hand, and smiled. "All right, Craig, what's up?" I held up my phone and pressed play. The footage. Him walking through the hedge. Him picking up the parcel. Him looking both ways like a man who knows exactly what he's doing. His face didn't crumble the way I expected. It went blank, completely flat, like a mask had fallen off and there was nothing behind it. He didn't deny it. He didn't apologize. He said, and I'll never forget this, he said, "How far back does the footage go?" Not "I'm sorry." Not "I can explain." He wanted to know how much I had on him. I told him everything. The camera, the eBay account, the forged signatures, the insulin. I told him I had enough to go to the police, and that what he'd done to Ellie's medication was criminal, not just theft, but something that could have endangered her life. My voice cracked when I talked about her. I didn't want it to, but it did. He leaned against the doorframe and rubbed his face. Then he tried to play the card I knew was coming. "Craig, mate, we're neighbors. We're friends. Let's sort this out between us. I'll pay you back. Every penny. Just don't involve the police. Think about my kids. Think about Paula." I looked at him and I said, "You didn't think about Ellie. I called the police that afternoon. They came, took my footage, took my statement, and arrested Darren the following Tuesday. The investigation turned up more than just my parcels. 3 other houses on the cul-de-sac had reported missing deliveries over the past 2 years. Nobody had ever connected them. Nobody had ever suspected Darren. He'd stolen from the Patels at number 4, from old Mrs. Grady at number 9, from the young couple who'd just moved in at number 12. The total value was estimated at over £4,000. He was charged with theft fraud by false representation, and because of the insulin, reckless endangerment, he pleaded guilty to the theft and fraud. The endangerment charge was dropped in a plea deal, which still makes me sick. The cul-de-sac changed after that. Not in the way you'd think. Some neighbors thanked me. Some avoided me. Mrs. Grady said she'd suspected something for months but didn't want to cause trouble. The Patels said they'd mentioned missing parcels to Darren himself, and he'd told them it was probably kids from the estate. Paula moved out within a month, took the kids to her mom's in Harrogate. The house went up for sale. The for sale sign stood there for weeks like a headstone, and the thing that still sits with me, the thing I turn over at 3 a.m. when I can't sleep, is how long it went on. 2 years. Maybe more. All because we trusted him. All because he smiled and waved and coached football and flipped burgers on a Sunday. All because in a quiet cul-de-sac in Leeds, nobody wants to be the one who points a finger. We'd rather lose 100 parcels than lose the peace. I know that now, and I know something else. The peace was never real. It was just silence. And silence is where people like Darren do their best work.
Story 2.
I retired to Suffolk to live quietly, to tend my garden, walk my border collie, and finally stop counting the days until Friday. After 31 years as a hospital administrator in London, I thought I'd earned the right to a slow life. I was wrong. Because within 18 months of moving to Bramfield, I found myself in the ugliest fight of my life, not against a corporation, not against a government body, but against a 26-year-old dog walker with 3,000 Instagram followers and a smile that could disarm anyone. Anyone except me. Her name was Gemma Holt. She ran a little business called Pause and Wander, and when I first moved to the village, no fewer than 4 neighbors recommended her. "Oh, you must use Gemma," they'd say, like they were sharing the name of a miracle worker. She was pretty energetic, always photographed mid-laugh with a cluster of happy dogs around her. Her social media was a highlight reel of muddy paws, autumn leaves, and captions, like another epic adventure with my furry best friends. She charged £12 per walk, which seemed reasonable. She had availability on Tuesdays and Thursdays, which suited me because those were the days I volunteered at the village library. So I signed Fergus up, my 9-year-old border collie, my companion, the only living thing that had made the move from London with me. And I handed him over to her like it was nothing. For the first few weeks, everything seemed fine. Gemma would collect Fergus at 10:30, bring him back around noon, and he'd seem tired but content. She'd send me a photo each time, Fergus in a field, Fergus by the river, Fergus with his tongue out. I'd reply with a thank you and a smiley face. I had no reason to doubt her. But then things started to change. Slowly. So slowly, I almost didn't notice. Fergus began losing weight. Not dramatically at first, just a slight thinning around his ribs that I attributed to the colder weather and maybe a change in his metabolism. He was 9 after all. Dogs age. But then his energy dropped. He stopped greeting me at the door. He'd lie in his bed and just stare at the wall, and when I'd put his dinner down, he'd eat like he hadn't seen food in days. Frantic, gulping, almost panicked eating. I took him to the vet. Our local vet, Sarah Marsh, ran blood tests and did a full examination. She told me Fergus was underweight, mildly dehydrated, and showing signs of chronic stress. She asked me if anything had changed in his routine. I mentioned Gemma. Sarah's face did something subtle, a tightening around the eyes, a pause before she spoke. She said, "You're not the first person to mention her name in here this month." That sentence changed everything. Sarah couldn't tell me specifics about other clients' veterinary confidentiality, but she told me enough. She said she'd seen a pattern. Dogs coming in lethargic, underweight, with anxiety behaviors. Dogs whose owners all used the same walker. She urged me to look into what was actually happening during those walks. So I did. I bought a small GPS tracker and clipped it to Fergus's collar. I also set up a camera inside my hallway to record the handoff when Gemma brought him home. And then I waited. The GPS data from the first tracked walk made my stomach turn. Gemma had picked Fergus up at 10:30 as usual. According to the tracker, she drove to a property on the outskirts of Halesworth, a rented cottage with a fenced back garden. Fergus stayed at that location for the entire duration of the walk. He didn't move more than 30 meters in 90 minutes. She hadn't walked him at all. She dumped him in a garden. When I checked her Instagram that evening, there was a new post. A photo of Fergus, clearly taken on a different day because the background was summer green and it was now November, with the caption, "Fergus absolutely smashed his woodland adventure today, 12 likes. 4 heart eye emojis. A comment from one of my neighbors saying, "He's so lucky to have you, Jim." I tracked 3 more walks. Same pattern every time. She'd collect the dogs, sometimes 5 or 6 at once, drive them to that cottage and leave them in the garden. No walking, no stimulation, no fresh water as far as I could tell. The dogs just sat there. And then she'd post old photos recycled from better days, and everyone would coo and comment and never question a thing. I also noticed something on the hallway camera. When Gemma brought Fergus back, she never had treats or a lead bag or any of the usual gear you'd expect from someone who'd just done a proper walk. She'd hand him over quickly, flash that smile, and leave. Fergus would walk straight past me to his water bowl and drink for a solid minute. Every single time. I compiled everything. GPS logs, timestamp photos, the vet's assessment, the camera footage. I put it in a folder because that's what 31 years of administration does to you. It makes you a compiler of evidence, and I called Gemma and asked her to come to my house. She arrived on a Thursday afternoon, all smiles, wearing one of her branded Paws and Wander fleeces. I sat her down at my kitchen table and I laid it out. Calmly. Factually. I showed her the GPS data. I showed her the vet report. I showed her the recycled photos. I told her I was terminating her services immediately and that I intended to inform her other clients. The smile didn't just fade. It was replaced by something I wasn't prepared for. Her eyes went hard. Not embarrassed, not ashamed, not even defensive in the way you'd expect from someone caught in a lie. She looked at me like I was an obstacle, a problem to be managed. She said very quietly, "You don't want to do this, Margaret." I told her I absolutely did. She stood up, took her phone out and said, "You have no idea what I can do." Then she left. Within 48 hours, my life in Bramfield became unrecognizable. Gemma posted a long, tearful video on her Instagram and Facebook accounts, claiming that a bitter, lonely retiree in the village was spreading malicious lies about her business because she'd refused to give a discount. She didn't name me directly, but in a village of 800 people, she didn't need to. She described my house. She described Fergus. She said I'd threatened her and that she was shaking and scared for her safety. The comments section was a wildfire. People I'd never met called me a bully, a Karen, a jealous old woman with nothing better to do. One person said I should have my dog taken away. Another said they hoped I'd get what was coming to me. 3 of my neighbors, people who'd recommended Gemma to me in the first place, stopped speaking to me. One of them, a woman named Diana, who I'd considered a friend, left a note in my letterbox that said, "You should be ashamed of yourself." I tried to share my evidence. I posted the GPS data and the vet's report on the village Facebook group. My post was deleted within an hour by the group administrator, who, as it turned out, was Gemma's aunt. I contacted the other dog owners directly. Most of them didn't want to hear it. 2 of them told me their dogs were fine. One woman, a quiet, nervous person named Helen, admitted she'd had similar concerns but said she was too frightened of the backlash to say anything publicly. Gemma had built something more powerful than a dog walking business. She'd built a brand, and that brand was her shield. Anyone who challenged it became the villain. But I am not someone who backs down when animals are suffering. I reported Gemma to the RSPCA with my full evidence file. I reported her to the local trading standards office for fraudulent advertising. I contacted the Suffolk Gazette, and a young reporter named Chris agreed to investigate. I also found 4 other former clients, people who'd quietly stopped using Gemma months ago, who were willing to speak on the record once they knew they weren't alone. Helen was one of them. Her elderly spaniel had lost nearly 3 kilos under Gemma's care. The newspaper story ran in February. It was thorough, fair, and devastating. GPS evidence. Veterinary statements from Sarah Marsh and 2 other vets. Testimonials from 5 former clients. Before and after photos of the dogs. Gemma tried to fight back online, but the tide had turned. People could see the data. They could see the weight loss charts. They could see the timestamps proving the walks never happened. Her follower count dropped. Her Google reviews filled with 1-star ratings. 2 weeks after the article, the RSPCA confirmed they were investigating. A month after that, Pause and Wander quietly disappeared. The Instagram went private, then was deleted entirely. Gemma moved out of the cottage, and last I heard, relocated to Norwich. No charges were filed. That still bothers me. She took money from dozens of people for a service she never provided, and she neglected animals who couldn't speak for themselves, and the system let her walk away. But Fergus is better now. He's put the weight back on. He greets me at the door again. He eats his dinner at a normal pace, without that awful desperation. I walk him myself now every single day, rain or shine. My knees ache and my hip complains, but I don't care. Diana eventually apologized. I accepted it, but something between us is broken and we both know it. The thing I keep coming back to is how easy it was. How easy it was for a charming person with a good camera and a warm smile to build a lie that an entire village believed. How quickly people turned on evidence because it contradicted someone they liked. I'm 73 years old, I've seen a lot. But I'd never seen anything quite as cold as a young woman posting a smiling photo of my starving dog and captioning it with a heart emoji. Fergus deserved better. They all did. And if being the village villain was the price of making sure he got it, then I'd pay it again tomorrow.
Story 3.
I still remember the exact sound my apron strings made when I pulled them loose. That soft whisper of cotton against cotton. Funny how your brain latches onto the smallest details when your entire life is about to change. My name is Maya Castillo, and for 3 years, 7 months, and 11 days, I was the head chef at Bellamy's on Michigan Avenue, one of the top-rated restaurants in Chicago. I built that menu from nothing. I trained that crew from a bunch of green culinary school kids into a machine that could push 400 covers on a Saturday night without breaking a sweat. And on a Friday in October, I walked out of that kitchen and never looked back. Let me tell you why. The owner was a man named Richard Bellamy. Rich, as he insisted everyone call him, though nobody on the line did. We called him other things. Rich inherited the restaurant from his father, who'd actually been a decent chef back in the 80s. Rich himself couldn't cook an egg without consulting YouTube. But he had the money, the real estate, and the name on the liquor license. So he walked around that kitchen like he was Gordon Ramsay reincarnated, touching things he shouldn't touch, tasting sauces he couldn't identify and offering. Suggestions that were really demands wrapped in a smile that never reached his eyes. For the first year, I managed him. That's what you learn as a head chef. Half the job is cooking, and the other half is managing the ego of whoever signs your checks. I'd nod when he told me the risotto needed more cream. I'd smile when he rearranged the plate presentation based on something he saw on Instagram. I'd quietly fix everything after he left the kitchen, and the food that went out to the dining room was mine. Always mine. But Rich had been getting worse. A lot worse. He'd started showing up during service, not just before or after. He'd stand behind the pass and contradict my calls. He'd pull dishes off the line and send them back for reasons he couldn't articulate beyond "it doesn't feel right." My sous chef Danny told me once that working under Rich felt like being a surgeon, while some guy who watched a few episodes of Grey's Anatomy kept grabbing the scalpel. The week before everything fell apart, Rich called me into his office. He wanted to change the lamb dish, our signature lamb dish, the one that had been written up in the Tribune, the one people literally reserved 2 weeks out to order. He wanted to swap the braising liquid from red wine to some high-end sake, because he'd been to a fusion place in LA and thought it was the future. I told him it wouldn't work with the flavor profile. I told him the rosemary and the sake would fight each other. I told him the dish was perfect the way it was. He told me to do it, or he'd find someone who would. So I did it. Against every instinct in my body, I reformulated the dish. I spent 3 days trying to make sake work with a Mediterranean lamb preparation, and honestly, I got it to a place that was acceptable. Not great. Not the dish that made us famous, but acceptable. That Friday, Rich had invited every food critic and influencer he could get his hands on. 12 of them seated at a long table right in the center of the dining room. He called it a showcase dinner. What it really was Rich trying to prove that Bellamy's was his vision, his genius, his restaurant. He'd been reading his own press clippings, press that quoted me by name, and it was eating him alive that people associated the food with me instead of him. Service started at 6. By 6:30, we were already in the weeds. The regular Friday crowd was packed in, plus the critic table ordering the full tasting menu, plus a private party of 20 in the back room that Rich had booked without telling me. My line was stretched thin. Danny was running grill and sauté simultaneously. My pastry chef Elena was plating desserts while prepping appetizers, everyone was working double. And then the lamb started going out. Table 7 sent it back. Then table 12. Then one of the critics flagged down a server and said politely but unmistakably that the lamb tasted confused. I watched through the pass window as Rich's face changed color. He stormed into the kitchen, and I knew in my bones what was about to happen. He didn't pull me aside. He didn't lower his voice. He stood in the middle of my kitchen during the hardest push of the night, with every single cook within earshot, and he said, "Maya, what the hell did you do to my lamb?" I looked at him. I said, "I made the changes you asked for, Rich." He laughed. Actually laughed. This short, ugly bark of a laugh. And then he said, "And I will remember these words until the day I die." He said, "I didn't tell you to ruin it. I told you to improve it. If you can't handle a simple adjustment without destroying a dish, maybe you're not the chef I thought you were." The kitchen went silent. Not quiet. Silent. The only sound was the hiss of butter in a pan that nobody was watching. I said, "Rich, you specifically told me to replace the red wine with sake." "I have the email." He stepped closer. Close enough that I could smell his cologne, that expensive, suffocating cologne he bathed in. And he said loud enough for the servers in the hallway to hear, "You're replaceable, Maya. Every chef in this city would kill for your position. Maybe it's time I reminded you of that." Then he told me he was docking my pay for the wasted lamb. $400 for a dish he had ordered me to change. Something broke in me. Not dramatically, not like in the movies where someone screams or throws a pan. It was quieter than that. It was like a wire that had been holding everything together just snapped. Silently. Completely. I looked at Danny. He was standing at the grill, his jaw tight, his eyes locked on mine. I looked at Elena, who had tears running down her face, not from sadness, from rage. I looked at my line cooks, Miguel and Terry and James, who had followed me from my last restaurant because they believed in me. Every single one of them was watching. Waiting. I reached behind my back. I pulled the strings of my apron. That soft whisper of cotton. I folded it once, set it on the pass, and I said, "Then replace me." Rich blinked. For the first time in 3 years, the man had nothing to say. I walked toward the back door. And behind me, I heard the most beautiful sound I've ever heard in a professional kitchen. One by one, aprons hitting stainless steel. Danny's first. Then Elena's. Then Miguel, Terry, James. The dishwasher, Carlos, who Rich had threatened to fire just last week for taking a bathroom break during service. Even Sarah, the new extern who had only been with us for 2 months. Every single person in that kitchen untied their apron and walked out behind me. We pushed through the back door into the alley, and the cold October air hit my face and I started shaking. Not from the cold. From the adrenaline. From the terror of what I'd just done. From the freedom of it. Danny put his hand on my shoulder and said, "That was 3 years overdue." Elena was already on her phone. "My cousin's got a space in Pilsen," she said. "Commercial kitchen, month-to-month lease." I didn't answer. I just stood there in that alley listening. Because if you were quiet enough, you could hear it through the walls. The sound of 200 tickets printing with nobody to cook them. The sound of servers pushing through the kitchen doors and finding nothing but empty stations and cooling burners. The sound of a man who called me replaceable, discovering in real time in front of every food critic in Chicago that he couldn't replace a single one of us. Rich tried to cook. I heard about it later from one of the servers who stayed. He actually put on an apron and tried to work the line himself. He burned the first 3 orders. He sent out raw chicken to table 9. A critic from the Sun-Times live tweeted the entire meltdown. By 9 o'clock, Rich was standing in an empty kitchen. The dining room half cleared his showcase dinner in ruins, and the hashtag Bellamy's burnout was trending in Chicago. The restaurant closed permanently 6 weeks later. As for me, Elena's cousin's space in Pilsen turned out to be perfect. We opened 4 months later. Small place, 30 seats, open kitchen. I named it Apron. Danny runs the line. Elena does pastry. Miguel, Terry, James, Carlos, every single person who walked out with me that night has a station and an equity stake. The Tribune reviewed us 3 months in. 4 stars. The critic wrote Chef Castillo's lamb, braised in red wine as God intended, is worth the trip alone. Rich never called, never apologized. Last I heard, he was trying to open a fast casual concept in the suburbs. I think about that night sometimes. Standing in that alley, shaking, terrified, with nothing but my crew and the cold air and the faint sound of a man's empire collapsing under the weight of his own ego. He told me I was replaceable. Turns out the only thing that was replaceable was him.
Story 4.
I changed the locks on my own house once. When I was 26, bought the place, first thing I did was swap out every lock because the previous owner was going through a messy divorce and I didn't trust that his ex wouldn't show up with a key. 14 years later, my sister did the same thing to me. Except she wasn't protecting the house from strangers. She was locking me out of it. Let me back up. My name's Greg. I'm 40 years old. I'm an electrician in Denver, and I've owned my house in Lakewood since 2010. 3 bedrooms, finished basement, small yard. Nothing fancy, but it's mine. Every wire in that place I've touched with my own hands. I know that house better than I know most people. My sister Dana is 3 years younger than me. She married a guy named Scott when she was 24. 2 kids, Mia, who's 9, and Jaden, who's 7. Scott wasn't a bad guy, but he wasn't a great one either. Drank too much, couldn't hold a job for more than 18 months. When Dana called me last October crying, saying they were done, saying she'd filed, I wasn't surprised. I was relieved for her, honestly. She asked if she could stay with me. Just for a few weeks. Just until she figured things out. She said the apartment she'd been looking at fell through and she didn't want the kids sleeping on someone's couch. I said yes. Of course I said yes. She's my sister. The first week was fine. Dana kept the basement tidy, the kids were polite, she cooked dinner twice. I told her, take your time, no rush, just keep me in the loop on your apartment search. She nodded and thanked me and said I was the best brother in the world. Week 2, she stopped mentioning apartments. Week 3, packages started showing up at my door with her name on them. Week 4, I came home from work and there was a shoe rack in my hallway that I didn't buy. A decorative mirror on the wall by the front door. Stuff from Home Goods with the tag still on. I didn't say anything. I should have. But you don't want to be the guy who makes his divorced sister with 2 kids feel unwelcome. So I swallowed it. Then came the job in Fort Collins. It was a commercial rewire, a restaurant renovation, 4 days on site. I left on a Tuesday morning, told Dana I'd be back Friday evening. She said great, she'd watch the house. I remember she smiled when she said it. I got back Friday around 7. Put my key in the front door. It didn't turn. I tried again. Jiggled it. Nothing. I checked right key, right lock. But the lock wasn't the same lock. The hardware was different. Brushed nickel instead of the brass I'd installed myself. I stood there on my own porch for a full minute just staring at it because my brain couldn't process what was happening. I knocked. Dana opened the door with this look on her face like I was a neighbor stopping by. She said, "Oh, I had the locks changed. The old ones felt flimsy. Here, I got you a key," and she handed me a key. To my own house? I should have lost it right there. But I was tired. 4 days of pulling wire through old walls, my back was killing me, and the kids were sitting right there on the couch watching a movie. So I took the key and I said, "Dana, you can't just change the locks on someone else's house. She said I was trying to help, relax. That Monday, I found out the rest. I was going through the mail, and there was a letter from Jefferson County Public Schools. Enrollment confirmation for Mia and Jaden. At the elementary school, 3 blocks from my house. Using my address as their home address. She hadn't asked me. Hadn't mentioned it. Just did it. When I confronted her, she said the kids needed stability, that she couldn't keep them bouncing around, and that since they were already living here, what was the big deal? The big deal. I told her she needed to start looking for a place. Seriously looking. I said I loved her and the kids, but this was my home and she was making decisions about it without me. She got quiet, then she got cold. Said I was being selfish. Said she had nowhere to go. Said the kids had already made friends. 2 days later, my phone started ringing. My mom called first. Then my Aunt Linda. Then my cousin Marcus. Then my other aunt, Patricia. One after another, all saying variations of the same thing. Dana told us you offered her the house. She said you told her she could stay as long as she needed. She said, "You're going back on your word." I could feel the blood draining from my face. She had called every single person in our family and told them a version of events that didn't happen. She'd painted this picture where I was the generous brother who'd open his home and now for no reason was trying to throw a mother and her children onto the street. My mother, my own mother, said to me, "Gregory, how could you do this to her after everything she's been through?" I tried to explain. Nobody wanted to hear it. When it's a woman with 2 kids versus a single guy with a 3-bedroom house, the math is already done in people's heads before you open your mouth. I could hear it in their voices. They'd already decided. I went home that night and told Dana she had 30 days. I was calm, I was direct. I said I'd help her find a place, I'd even cover first month's rent, but she needed to be out. She looked at me and said, "This is my home now too, Greg. You can't just kick us out." That's when I realized. This wasn't my sister being desperate. This was a plan. The locks, the school enrollment, the family phone tree, she was building a case. She was establishing residency. She knew exactly what she was doing. I called a lawyer the next morning. Sat in his office, feeling sick to my stomach while he explained Colorado tenant law to me. Dana had been living there for over 30 days. Even without a lease, even without paying rent, she had tenant rights. I couldn't just change the locks back. I couldn't move her stuff out. I had to go through a formal eviction process. Against my own sister. The eviction notice went out on a Thursday. Dana cried. The kids looked confused and scared, and that almost broke me. Almost. But then I remembered standing on my own porch with a key that didn't work, and I held firm. She fought it. Of course she fought it. She showed up to the hearing with a legal aid attorney and argued she'd been invited to live there indefinitely. She showed texts where I'd said, "Take your time and no rush." Her lawyer tried to frame those as an open-ended agreement. The judge saw through it. He asked Dana one question that ended everything. "Did you have the homeowner's written permission to change the locks on his property?" She said no. He asked if she had written permission to enroll her children using his address. She said no. He granted the eviction. She moved out on a Sunday in January. Didn't say a word to me. Loaded up a U-Haul with stuff, some of it hers, some of it mine. I didn't even fight over it and drove to my mom's house in Aurora. My mom still isn't speaking to me. Neither is my Aunt Linda. My cousin Marcus sent me a text that just said, "Cold-blooded and nothing else." At Christmas, I wasn't invited to the family dinner. First time in 40 years. Dana got an apartment in February. 2 bedrooms, subsidized housing. The kids are fine. She's fine. She landed on her feet, which is what she would have done months earlier if she hadn't been so busy trying to land on mine. I changed the locks again after she left. Went back to brass. installed a deadbolt and a camera system too. Some nights I sit in that basement where she stayed and I think about calling my mom, about explaining one more time. But I've learned something about family. They don't want the truth. They want the version that lets them sleep at night. And the version where the single guy gives up his house for the struggling mom, that's the one that lets everybody sleep. Everybody except me.
Story 5.
I used to love coming home after a 12-hour shift. Kicking off my shoes, pouring a glass of cheap wine, running a bath so hot it turned my skin pink. My apartment on the second floor of a graystone in Logan Square was the first place that ever felt like mine. 800 square feet of freedom. I want you to remember that feeling, that sense of safety, because I need you to understand what it means when someone takes it from you. My name is Dana. I'm 27. I'm a trauma nurse at Stroger Hospital, which means I spend my nights elbow deep in the worst things people do to each other. I thought I understood violence. I thought I understood predators. I didn't know one was living directly above me. The first sign was small. So small, I almost feel stupid talking about it. I came home one Tuesday in November and my bathroom towel was on the wrong hook. Left hook instead of right. I'm particular about things you have to be when you work in a hospital, but I told myself I was tired. I told myself I probably moved it and forgot. Then it was the window. I always lock the window above the fire escape before I leave. Always. But I came home and it was unlocked. Not open, just unlocked. Like someone wanted a way back in. I mentioned it to my landlord, Gerald Voss. 62 years old, retired electrician, lived on the third floor. He'd been perfectly pleasant when I signed the lease. Helped me carry boxes up the stairs. Told me to call him Jerry. When I told him about the window, he frowned and said the building was old, that latches sometimes slipped. He said he'd look into it. A week later, I came home and smelled cologne. Not mine. Not any product I own. A sharp woody scent hanging in the bathroom air like someone had just been standing there. I changed the locks that night. Deadbolt chain, the works. I paid a locksmith $160 I didn't really have, and I slept better for exactly 4 days. Then I came home from a double shift and found a new scratch around the deadbolt. Fresh brass shavings on the floor, so small you'd miss them if you weren't looking. But I was looking now. I changed the locks again. Different brand, higher security. I also bought a cheap indoor camera, one of those little white ones you stick on a shelf, and pointed it at the front door. The next day I checked the footage from work on my lunch break. At 11:47 a.m., my front door opened. Gerald Voss walked in carrying a small toolkit. He moved through my apartment like he owned it, which technically he did, but there was nothing to fix. No maintenance request. No emergency. He walked to the bathroom, stayed in there for 6 minutes, then left. He locked the door behind him with what I can only assume was a master key he'd had cut. I felt sick. Physically sick. I went to the bathroom at the hospital and threw up my coffee. But I didn't call the police. Not yet. Because I knew what they'd say. Landlord entered the unit without notice. It's a lease violation, not a crime. File a complaint with the city. I'd seen enough people dismissed by the system to know that creepy doesn't move the needle. I needed more. So I went home that night and I searched. I searched every inch of that apartment like I was prepping a trauma bay, methodical, thorough, missing nothing. I checked the outlets, the vents, the light fixtures. I checked behind the mirror. I checked the carbon monoxide detector in the hallway. Then I climbed onto the edge of my bathtub and looked at the smoke detector directly above it. It was hardwired into the ceiling, which made sense for an old building. But when I unscrewed the cover and pulled it down, my hands started shaking. There was a pinhole camera nestled inside. Tiny. Professional grade. Wired directly into the building's electrical, so it never needed batteries. A thin Ethernet cable ran from it up through a drilled hole in the ceiling up into the third floor. Into Gerald's apartment. I stood there on the edge of my bathtub holding this thing, and the room tilted. Every bath I'd taken, every time I'd stepped out of the shower, every night I'd stood in front of that mirror. He'd seen all of it. I wanted to rip it out. Every cell in my body screamed at me to tear it from the ceiling and smash it on the floor. But I didn't. Because that camera was evidence, and evidence was the only thing that was going to put him away. I put the cover back on. I climbed down. And then I sat on my bathroom floor and cried so hard. I couldn't breathe. When I was done, I washed my face and I got to work. I called my friend Marcus, who works in IT at Northwestern. I told him everything. He came over that night with a laptop and a network scanner. We traced the Ethernet cable signal. It was streaming to a local server, not cloud-based local, and Marcus was able to identify the device's MAC address and the IP it was routing to. The server was registered to the residential address directly above mine. Gerald Voss. 3rd floor. Marcus looked at me and said, "Dana, this isn't a lease violation. This is a felony." Illinois is a 2-party consent state for recording. Unauthorized video surveillance in a bathroom is a Class 4 felony video exploitation of a private space. If he was storing the footage, that's additional charges. If he was distributing it, we were talking federal. But here's the thing, no one tells you about gathering evidence against someone who lives 12 feet above your head. You still have to sleep there. You still have to hear his footsteps on the ceiling. You still have to walk past his door on the stairs and smile and say good morning, because if he suspects anything, if he thinks for 1 second that you know, he will destroy that server and every file on it, and it becomes your word against his. So I performed. For 9 days, I performed. I kept my routine exactly the same. I showered at the hospital when I could, but I still had to use the bathroom at home. I hung a towel over the smoke detector like it had fallen from the hook, casual enough to seem accidental. I smiled at Gerald in the hallway. I asked him about the Bears game. And every night I lay in bed knowing he was up there, probably watching a feed of my empty bathroom, waiting for the towel to come down. Meanwhile, Marcus and I documented everything. We had the footage from my shelf camera showing Gerald entering without permission 3 separate occasions. We had photographs of the pinhole camera in situ. We had the network trace linking the camera's feed to his address. I kept a written log with dates, times, and descriptions of every anomaly I had noticed going back to September. On day 9, I walked into the Chicago Police Department's 14th District Station and asked to speak with a detective. I brought a folder 2 inches thick. The detective's name was Rojas. She was maybe 40 and she didn't blink when I laid it all out. She looked at the network trace, looked at the photographs, and said, "We're going to need a warrant for his unit and I want to move fast." She asked me one question I'll never forget. She said, "How long do you think this has been going on?" I told her I'd lived there 14 months. She closed her eyes for just a second. Then she picked up the phone. They executed the warrant 2 days later. I wasn't there. Rojas made me stay at Marcus's place. She called me at 4 p.m. They found the server. They found 14 months of footage. They found footage of the previous tenant too, a woman named Kiko, who'd lived there for 2 years before me. Gerald had built a library. Organized by date. Hundreds of hours. He was arrested in his living room still wearing his slippers. He told the officers it was his building and he had a right to monitor his property. He said it with a straight face. Gerald Voss was charged with 2 counts of unauthorized video recording, 1 count of video exploitation, and 1 count of unlawful surveillance. The state's attorney added a charge of criminal trespass after reviewing my shelf camera footage. He posted bail. His attorney tried to argue the cameras were part of a security system. The judge wasn't buying it. I broke my lease that week. I didn't ask for my deposit back. I moved into a studio in Pilsen that cost more than I can comfortably afford, and the first thing I did was check every smoke detector, every vent, every outlet. I still do that every single day. Keiko and I are both cooperating with the prosecution. We've never met in person, but we've talked on the phone twice. The second time she cried and told me she'd always felt something was wrong in that apartment, but convinced herself she was being paranoid. That's the thing about this kind of violation. It makes you doubt your own instincts. It makes you feel crazy for trusting the feeling in your gut. And then when you find out you were right, you don't feel vindicated. You feel sick. Because your gut was screaming the whole time and you kept telling it to shut up. Gerald Voss is awaiting trial. He still owns the building. And somewhere in that gray stone in Logan Square, there might be wires in the walls I never found. I try not to think about that. But I do. Every night I do.
Story 6.
I stole my granddaughter's pacifier at a family barbecue, mailed it to a DNA testing lab, and blew up 3 generations of my family in 11 days. And the worst part, the part that keeps me awake at 3 a.m. staring at the ceiling fan, is that the bomb I built landed right back in my own living room. My name is Diane. I'm 61 years old. I live in Marietta, Georgia, in a 4-bedroom colonial. I've kept immaculate for 30 years. I raised 2 sons, managed every holiday, every school function, every doctor's appointment. I was the backbone. I was the one who held it all together. That's what I told myself anyway. Let me tell you how I destroyed everything. My oldest son, Marcus, married Keisha 4 years ago. I never liked her. I'll just say it. I thought she was too independent, too secretive, too quick to shut me out of decisions about my own grandbaby. When Amara was born, Keisha limited my visits. Said I was overwhelming. Said I needed to respect boundaries. Boundaries. That word makes my jaw tight even now. I spent 30 years running this family. I don't do boundaries. But here's the thing I couldn't let go of. Amara didn't look like Marcus. Not to me. She had lighter skin, different features, and I know no times people will say, babies change, genetics are complicated, all of that. But something in my gut wouldn't quit. And when your gut talks, you either listen or you spend the rest of your life wondering. So at the 4th of July barbecue, while Keisha was in the bathroom and Marcus was flipping burgers, I picked up Amara's pacifier off the picnic blanket, slipped it into a Ziploc bag in my purse, and smiled at my husband Gerald like nothing happened. That Monday, I ordered a home paternity kit. I swabbed Marcus's coffee cup when he came by to drop off my prescription. He didn't even notice, and I mailed both samples to the lab with expedited shipping. $97.14 to detonate my family. The results came back 9 days later. I opened the envelope standing at my kitchen counter with the morning news on in the background. The report said Marcus was not Amara's biological father. Probability of paternity 0.0%. My hands were shaking, but not from shock. From vindication. I felt time's right, asterisk. I'd known it. I'd known Keisha was hiding something, and now I had proof in black and white. I didn't call Marcus. Not yet. I sat with that envelope for 2 days thinking about timing. Because if you're going to expose someone, you do it when it counts. You do it when there are witnesses. You do it when they can't run. Thanksgiving was 48 hours away. I made my move the night before. I didn't do it face to face. I know that makes me look worse, but I wanted everyone to see it at the same time. I photographed the results, typed up a message, and dropped it into the family group chat. 23 people. Marcus. Keisha. My younger son, Darnell. Cousins, aunts, Gerald's sister, everyone. The message said, I think the family deserves to know the truth before we sit down together tomorrow. I had a paternity test done. Marcus is not Amara's biological father. I'm sorry, but lies don't belong at my table. The chat exploded within minutes. Marcus called me 17 times. I didn't answer. Keisha sent one message, just one, that said, "You had no right." Darnell texted, "Mom, what did you do?" Not a question, a statement. My sister-in-law Paulette called me evil. My niece said I was unhinged. Gerald sat across from me in his recliner and didn't say a word. He just stared at the television like he'd gone deaf. But then something shifted. Around midnight, Keisha posted in the chat a long message. She said yes, she'd had an affair before the wedding. She said she and Marcus had already dealt with it privately. She said Marcus Times knew times he might not be Amara's biological father and had chosen to raise her anyway because he loved her. She said they'd been in couples therapy for 2 years and had made peace with it. She said the only person who couldn't leave it alone was me. I felt the ground tilt. Marcus knew. He already knew. And he'd chosen his family anyway, and I'd just dragged that choice into the light for 23 people to pick apart. But I couldn't back down. I told myself Keisha was just doing damage control. I told myself Marcus was brainwashed. I told myself I was still right. Then Gerald spoke. He was still in his recliner. He hadn't moved in hours. The TV was off now. The house was dead quiet. And he looked at me with an expression I'd never seen in 32 years of marriage. Not anger, not disappointment. Fear. He said, "Diane, you need to stop." I said, "I'm protecting our son." He said, "No, you're not. And if you keep pulling this thread, it's going to come back to us." I didn't understand. Not at first. I asked him what he meant. He got up, walked to the hallway closet, and pulled a shoebox from the top shelf behind the Christmas tablecloth behind the wreath I use every year. He set it on the kitchen table and opened it. Inside were letters. Old letters. And a photograph of a boy I didn't recognize, maybe 8 or 9 years old, with Gerald's exact jawline, Gerald's exact ears, Gerald's exact hands. Gerald had a son. A son from an affair in 1991, 3 years into our marriage, with a woman named Lorraine who lived in Decatur. The boy's name was Terrence. Gerald had been sending money, not much, but something, for over 20 years. Lorraine had passed away in 2015. Terrence was 32, now living in Charlotte. Gerald had never told me. Never told Marcus or Darnell. Never told anyone. He said, "I kept this secret to protect this family." The same way Marcus was trying to protect his. And you just made that impossible for him. I sat down at the kitchen table and I couldn't breathe. 30 years. 30 years of me managing every detail, controlling every narrative, deciding who was trustworthy and who wasn't, and the biggest lie in the family was sitting in my own hallway closet behind a Christmas wreath. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the kitchen until the sun came up reading those letters. They were mundane mostly. School updates. A dental bill. A note about Terrence's first job. Normal life happening in parallel to mine, funded by my husband, invisible to me. I thought I knew everything. I thought that was my job. I thought control was the same thing as love. Thanksgiving morning, no one came. Marcus texted the group chat at 8 a.m. and said he and Keisha would not be attending. Darnell said he was taking his girlfriend to her family's dinner instead. Paulette didn't respond at all. My 23-person group chat went silent for the first time in years. Gerald made himself a plate of leftovers from the fridge and ate alone in the living room. I sat at the dining table I'd set for 12, the good china, the cloth napkins, the centerpiece I'd spent $40 on, and I ate nothing. 2 weeks later, Marcus called. Not to forgive me. To tell me that he and Keisha were setting a firm boundary, that word again, and that I would not be seeing Amara until I completed therapy and demonstrated that I understood what I'd done. He said it calmly. He said it like he'd rehearsed it. He probably had. I asked about Gerald's secret. whether he'd told Marcus about Terrence. He said Gerald had called him the morning after and told him everything. Marcus said at least Dad had the decency to be ashamed. Gerald and I are still in the same house. We sleep in separate rooms now. He's talking about reaching out to Terrence openly, no more hiding. I don't know if our marriage survives that. I don't know if it should. I spent 30 years believing I was the foundation of this family. Turns out I was just the person everyone was managing around. The secrets weren't a failure of my vigilance. They were a response to it. I wanted the truth so badly that I stole it from a baby's mouth. And the truth I got was that I never knew my own house. Not even close.
Story 7.
Everyone thinks my husband is a saint. I'm sure that's what he's telling people now. He's the good man, the stable provider, the one who took in a single mom and her 2 boys when we had nothing. And I was grateful, I really was. But living on gratitude alone is like trying to stay warm by a picture of a fire. It looks nice, but you're still freezing. When I married him, I didn't just move into a house. I moved into a life that was already perfectly preserved under glass. His first wife, the mother of his 2 daughters, was everywhere. Her pictures were on the mantel, her books were on the shelves, her favorite coffee mug was still in the cupboard. I felt like a ghost haunting someone else's home. His daughters, who were almost adults, were perfectly nice to me. They called me by my first name and treated me like a cool older sister they had to hang out with on holidays. They never once called me a stepmom. I was an addition, a new piece of furniture he'd brought in, but I never felt like family. I was just there. He's a kind man, I won't deny that. But his kindness feels like a form of control. It's quiet. It's steady, and it never ever gets loud. He wanted to adopt my sons. He presented it like this amazing gift, this final step in making us a real family. But all I could hear was him trying to erase their past. Erase their father. Erase the part of me that existed before I met him. My boys have a father. He wasn't perfect. Far from it, but he's a part of them. My husband wanting to stamp his own name over, that felt less like love and more like a hostile takeover. The worst part was how he handled my own father. My dad can be a lot. He's old school loud, and he never thought my husband was man enough for me. He'd make little comments at dinner, digs about my husband's job, or his quiet nature. And my husband would just sit there and take it. He'd smile that calm, polite smile and change the subject. He called it being non-confrontational. I called it leaving me to fight my own battles. He wouldn't stand up for himself, which meant he would never stand up for me. I was the one stuck in the middle, defending my husband to my father, and then trying to explain my father to my husband. I felt completely alone, trapped in this beautiful, sterile house that was really a shrine to another woman. I was suffocating. Then in February, my ex came back. He just showed up. The world sees him as a deadbeat who disappeared, and maybe he was. But to me, he was the guy I fell in love with at 19, the other half of my kids. He wasn't safe or predictable. He was a hurricane, and after years of living in a climate-controlled box, I can't tell you how good it felt to feel the wind and the rain again. He didn't just come back with apologies. He came back with a mission. One afternoon, he met me at a coffee shop and slid a thick envelope across the table. Inside was $15, 0 inches cash. It was probably every penny he had in the world. It was a stupid, reckless, dramatic gesture, and it was the most romantic thing anyone had done for me in years. My husband manages our finances on a spreadsheet, planning for a retirement I couldn't even imagine. My ex showed up with a bag of cash because he felt guilty and wanted to fix something he broke. That messy, chaotic, desperate love was something my new perfect life had completely scrubbed clean. It wasn't a plan. The affair wasn't something I thought about and decided to do. It was more like a slow collapse. We started talking on the phone about the boys, about old times. We talked about who we used to be. With him, I wasn't my husband's second wife, or a guest in a stranger's home. I was just me. The me I was before all this. The conversations turned into him stopping by, just for a coffee, just to talk. Then a hand on my arm. A look that lasted too long. I knew it was wrong, but it felt more real than anything else in my life. That Monday morning, my husband was at work and the kids were at school. The house was quiet. My ex came over. For the first time, standing in that big, silent living room, it didn't feel like I was trespassing. It felt like my space. He looked at me, and I didn't see a replacement or a project to be fixed. He just saw me. He stepped forward and kissed me, and it was like a dam breaking inside me. All the loneliness, all the frustration, all the feeling of being invisible just washed away. It was a stupid, terrible mistake, but it was my mistake. We ended up on the couch and I felt more alive and more myself than I had in years. It wasn't about betraying my husband. It was about finding a piece of me I thought I had lost forever. In that moment, with the morning sun streaming through the windows, I felt completely, utterly seen. We were still on the couch, tangled up in clothes and shame, and a strange kind of relief when I heard the sound. It wasn't the garage door opening or a car in the driveway. It was just the soft click of the front door. I never heard him come in. My ex scrambled to pull his shirt back on, but I just froze. My husband doesn't yell. He doesn't throw things. He just stood in the doorway of the living room holding his briefcase, his face as calm and empty as a frozen lake. He looked at my ex, not with anger, but with a kind of mild disinterest, like he was a bug on the wall. "You should leave," he said. His voice was perfectly level. My ex looked at me, his face pale, but he just grabbed his jacket and walked out without another word. My husband didn't even watch him go. His eyes were fixed on me. "Get dressed," he said, and went into the kitchen. There was no screaming match. There was no crying or begging. I thought maybe he was in shock. I followed him into the kitchen, my hands shaking as I buttoned my shirt, trying to string words together. An apology, an explanation, anything. But he was already one step ahead. He was always one step ahead. He turned from the counter, holding his phone. "I was suspicious," he said, as if he were discussing a dip in the stock market. "Your phone calls, your moods. So I took precautions." He tapped the screen and set the phone on the kitchen island angled toward me. And I saw it. I saw our living room filmed from a weird angle up by the ceiling. I saw my ex walk in. I saw us talk. I saw him kiss me. I saw everything that had happened on the couch, all of it playing out in grainy, silent video. A tiny camera hidden on top of the entertainment center. He had been watching me. The feeling of being a ghost in his house was wrong. I wasn't a ghost. I was a specimen under a microscope. I felt sick. It wasn't just the shame of being caught. It was the horror of being spied on. He wasn't a hurt husband. He was an intelligence officer who had just confirmed his target was a traitor. Our prenup is very clear about infidelity, he said, putting the phone back in his pocket. You get nothing. I just stared at him, my mind reeling. The betrayal of the affair felt small compared to the cold, calculated betrayal of that camera. He hadn't been loving me. He'd been monitoring me. Then he delivered the final killing blow. I thought your father should know what kind of situation this is, he said calmly, so he doesn't get any wrong ideas about who is at fault. I sent him a copy. The air left my lungs. I think I actually stumbled back against the counter. He didn't just tell my father. He sent him the video asterisk. The one person on this earth who I thought would always be in my corner, my loud, protective, difficult dad. My husband had taken my lowest moment, the worst thing I had ever done, and mailed it to him like a piece of evidence. He knew my dad was my weakness and my strength, and he used my shame to break him, to finally win the silent war he'd been fighting with him. He didn't just want to divorce me. He wanted to leave me utterly, completely alone. The meeting a few days later wasn't a conversation. It was a sentencing hearing. We sat at the big dining room table he'd shared with his first wife. My husband sat at one end looking like a judge. I sat on one side. And my father sat next to me, looking older and smaller than I had ever seen him. He wouldn't even look at me. My husband placed a small digital recorder on the table and pressed the red button. For the record, he began. He laid out the terms of my surrender. The prenup would be enforced. I would leave the house. He was filing for divorce immediately. Then came the part about my boys. He said with that same calm, reasonable voice that he wanted to do what was best for them. He would not contest me, having primary custody, of course. In fact, he would continue to pay for their private school and all their expenses as long as I agreed to the terms. He was positioning himself as the hero, the benevolent man stepping up to care for the children of the woman who destroyed their family. My father just sat there, broken. The loud, boisterous man who criticized my husband for being weak was completely silent. He had seen the video. He had been defeated. My husband didn't just win against me. He won against him too. I was a pawn they had both been playing with, and I had just been swept off the board. I left that house with 2 suitcases and my sons. I'm staying with a friend for now. Everyone will hear his side of the story. They'll see the stable, kind man whose wife cheated on him in his own home. They'll see the saint who is still taking care of her kids. They won't see the tiny camera on the TV stand. They won't see the man who watched his wife like a prisoner, waiting for her to break. They won't see the coldness in his eyes when he used my shame like a weapon. He wasn't a victim in this. He was my keeper. And this whole thing, the affair, the discovery, the divorce, it wasn't a tragedy for him. It was just his way of making sure that even after I was finally out of his house, he still had me locked in a cage.
Story 8.
I know what he's telling everyone. I'm the monster. I'm the fiancé who cheated on the sweet, depressed guy who only ever wanted to love me. It's a simple story, and it makes me the perfect villain. But the truth is, our story was never simple. It was a mess from the very beginning. When I met him, it felt like finding the other half of a shipwreck. I was running from a man who had controlled my every word, my every friendship, my every dollar for years. I was a ghost. My ex had hollowed me out, and I was just trying to remember what it felt like to be a real person. He, my fiancé, was reeling from his own kind of loss, a deep sadness that clung to him like a wet coat. We didn't fall in love. We found each other in the dark and held on because we were both terrified of being alone. We were clinging to each other for warmth, two broken people trying to make a whole. Early on, he suggested we be polyamorous. He said it was for me, so I could experiment and find myself after everything I'd been through. I see now that it was really for both of us. It was our way of admitting that we were too damaged for a real all-in commitment. It was a safety net. I thought it was my chance to feel like my own person again, to feel desired without the weight of someone's entire world on my shoulders. So I tried. I met up with his old friend a few times. It was nice. He was funny. And he looked at me like I was just a woman, not a charity case or a rescue project. And yes, we slept together. We had rules, we were open about it, and it was all supposed to be fine. But when I actually used the freedom he'd given me, something in him just broke. He never took the opportunities he had to see other people, which just made me feel worse, like I was the only one taking advantage of our arrangement. Then the panic attacks started. I was already struggling to keep my own depression from swallowing me whole, and suddenly I was responsible for his too. It became my job to talk him down, to breathe with him, to make sure he was okay. One night it all blew up. We were at his friend's house, the same friend I'd been seeing, and he had a full-blown panic attack right there in the living room. It was awful. The whole night became about him, his breathing, his terror. And I felt this horrible wave of shame like I had caused it. Like my tiny piece of freedom, the one thing I was doing for myself was destroying him. It felt like I had traded one cage for another. This one wasn't made of anger and control, but of his sorrow and anxiety. Honestly, I don't know which is worse. I had to leave. I broke up with him because I couldn't breathe. The weight of his mental health on top of mine was crushing me. But being alone was terrifying. The world felt loud and sharp and hostile. All the ghosts from my past relationship came back, and I felt that same old fear creeping in. So I went back to him. I was the one who proposed. I know how crazy that sounds, but I wanted the dream. I wanted a white dress and a promise and a future that looked stable. I thought if we just had the official piece of paper, the ring, the titles of husband and wife, we could build a normal life. I thought a promise could fix us. Fix me. We agreed to be monogamous. The polyamory experiment was over. We were going to be a real couple. For a few months, it actually worked. It felt wholesome. We were planning a wedding, talking about the future. I let myself believe it was real. Then came the fight. We were at a family dinner, and his sister got drunk. She started laying into me, asking all these pointed, nasty questions about my past, about the polyamory, making little jabs about me not being good enough for him. And he just sat there. He didn't say a word. He didn't defend me. He just stared at his plate and let her tear me apart. In that moment, I felt a loneliness so deep it hurt to breathe. It was that old familiar feeling of being completely and utterly alone, even when the person who is supposed to love you is sitting right next to you. I left. I drove straight to his friend's place. I wasn't planning for anything to happen. I just needed to talk to someone who saw me as a person, not a project he had to manage, or a problem his family had to approve of. We sat and talked for hours. He listened. He didn't judge me. He made me feel seen. And it happened. It was a stupid, terrible mistake, born from feeling completely abandoned. It was a self-destruct button, and I pushed it. The guilt was instant and suffocating. I knew I had broken our new promise, the most important one we had ever made. A few days later, he knew something was wrong. He asked me if I'd seen his friend. I couldn't just drop the whole horrible truth on him at once. I looked at him, and all I could see was how fragile he was. I was terrified the truth would break him completely and break us along with him. So I lied. Or I didn't tell the whole truth. I tried to protect him. I told him we touched. A few weeks later, when he was stronger, I admitted we kissed. I was trying to meter out the pain to give it to him in pieces I thought he could handle. It wasn't a lie to be cruel or to get away with it. It was a panicked, flawed, stupid attempt to keep our world from shattering into a million pieces. Eventually, months later, I told him everything. The whole story. It was the hardest conversation of my life. He cried. I cried. It was a nightmare. But after the dust settled, we decided to try. We were in therapy, both of us. We were talking more than we ever had. It was raw and painful, but for the first time it felt like we were actually fighting for a real future. I really believed we were slowly, painstakingly healing. I thought the worst was finally behind us. Then my phone blew up. I was at work, and it started buzzing and didn't stop. A flood of notifications from our group chat. At first I was just annoyed, but then I saw the previews. My name? His name? Snippets of words like cheated and lied. My heart dropped. I opened the chat, and there it was. He had taken screenshots of our most private conversations from the past few months. My agonizing piecemeal confession. His heartbroken replies. my pleas for forgiveness. And he had added his own commentary, his own notes narrating my betrayal for an audience. He had sent it all to a group chat with a dozen of our closest friends. My whole body went cold. I couldn't breathe. I ran to the bathroom and locked myself in a stall, shaking so hard I could barely hold my phone. He took my absolute worst moment, the mistake I was most ashamed of, the secret pain we were supposed to be healing together, and he made it public knowledge. He turned my private failing into public entertainment. When I finally got him on the phone, he was sobbing. He claimed it was an accident. He said he was trying to send it to his sister to vent and he clicked the wrong chat. An accident. Does it even? Does it matter if he tripped and pushed me off a cliff? Or if he pushed me on purpose, I was still falling. He humiliated me in front of our entire social circle with the tap of a screen. He talks about betrayal, I get it. I broke our promise. I slept with someone else. I betrayed our engagement with one person in a moment of utter weakness and loneliness, but I confessed it to him privately. I was willing to do the ugly, painful work of fixing what I had broken. What he did was different. He betrayed my entire existence. He took my trust in our shared history and detonated it in a public square for everyone to see. He held up my shame like a trophy. The aftermath was exactly what you'd expect. The silence from our friends was deafening. The few who did reach out sent me these cautious, pitying messages, asking if I was okay, but not really wanting to hear it. They had already picked a side. How could they not? He had the receipts. He had screenshots. He had curated a perfect narrative where he was the sympathetic victim and I was the cold, calculating monster. He handed them a simple story and they took it. I was radioactive. People we'd known for years looked at me with different eyes. I wasn't a person anymore. I was a cautionary tale. We tried to talk. I went over to our apartment to get my things and he was just broken. He kept saying he was sorry that he never meant for it to happen. But in the next breath, he'd accuse me of not understanding his pain. He wanted me to comfort him for the public humiliation that he had caused. He couldn't see past his own hurt to understand what he had done to me. He exposed me, and then he demanded I help him clean up the mess. It's not even over. He still won't let it go. He's been contacting the friend I slept with, demanding the truth. He's asking for details, a timeline, as if my own gut-wrenching confession wasn't good enough. It's not about truth anymore. It's about control. He's gathering more evidence, looking for more details to paint me as an even bigger villain. He can't accept my version where I was a flawed, broken person who made a terrible mistake. He needs the version where I'm purely evil, because that makes him purely good. It makes him the hero of the story. I left an abuser who controlled my life with anger and threats. I thought I had escaped that. I thought I'd found someone gentle, someone who understood pain. But I just ended up with someone who uses his pain as a weapon. He found a different way to control me. Instead of telling me who I could see or what I could wear, he controlled how everyone saw me. He took my worst mistake and used it to brand me, to isolate me, to make sure I'd be alone again. He knew my deepest fear was not being safe, of having my life exposed and picked apart. And that's exactly what he did. He made sure that even if I left him, I'd be leaving with nothing and no one. So yes, I cheated. I own that. It was wrong, and I will carry the shame of it for a long, long time. But his betrayal was worse. I broke a promise between two people. He broke a person. And he did it in front of everyone we knew.
Story 9.
They're calling me the Queen Bee, the mastermind, the one who broke up all our homes. I see the comments online, the whispers in the grocery store. They paint me as some kind of monster, a bored housewife who decided to play with people's lives for fun. But they don't know the truth. They don't know what it felt like to be slowly suffocating. When my husband and I moved back to our hometown 4 years ago, everyone thought it was perfect. A big house close to our parents, a great place to raise the kids. But for me, it felt like a cage. My husband Mark is a good man. He provides, he doesn't yell, he's a decent dad. But our life was a flat line. Every morning was the same coffee, the same small talk. Every night was the same TV shows, the same tired kiss on the cheek before he rolled over and started snoring. I wasn't a person. I was a function. A cook, a cleaner, a driver. I was background noise in my own life. Then about 6 months after we moved back, I ran into my old high school boyfriend at the post office. We got coffee just to catch up, and it was like a light switched on inside me. He saw times me, asterisk. Not Mark's wife, not the kid's mom. Just Betty. The conversation was easy, we laughed, and for the first time in years, I felt interesting. It started small. Lunches. Then the lunches got longer. One day he told me about a new spa hotel that opened up an hour away. He said we could just get a day pass, use the pool. It was innocent, but we both knew it wasn't. That day was the first time I felt like I could breathe in years. Nothing major happened, but the thrill of the secret of having something that was just mine was intoxicating. It became our thing. A stolen afternoon here, a secret dinner there. The crazy thing was, it made my life at home better. I stopped being so resentful of Mark. I had more patience with the kids. I was happy, because I had a little piece of my life that was just for me. It was a fantasy, a release valve that let all the pressure out, so I didn't explode. I wasn't going to leave my husband. I loved my family. This was just maintenance, a way to keep the engine running. I started to notice the same look in my friends' eyes. That hollowed-out expression you get when your entire identity has been swallowed up by your family. I saw it most in Sue. She looked constantly exhausted, one step away from just sitting down in the middle of the floor and crying. We were all in the same boat. So, one night, after a couple of glasses of wine, I told them my secret. Not all the details, but the general idea. I told them I had a way to feel like myself again. I explained that it wasn't about hurting our husbands or destroying our families. It was about self-preservation. It was a way to find a little bit of happiness, so we could bring that happiness back home. I thought I was giving them a gift, a key, to unlock their own cages. A few of the girls got it immediately. They understood it was about a feeling, not about a man. Soon it became our secret club. We'd cover for each other. Oh, she's with me at the mall. We shared stories not in a gossipy way, but like we were sharing battle plans for our own survival. It worked. We were all better for it. When Sue told me she'd started seeing Frank, a guy she knew from work, I was thrilled for her. She was smiling again. She had a spark back in her eyes. I thought finally she gets it. She's taking something for herself. My only rule, the one I repeated over and over, was, be smart. Don't get emotional. Don't get sloppy. This isn't a fairy tale romance. It's a tool. You use it carefully and you put it away when you're done. But Sue got sloppy. Frank was a terrible choice. He was connected to our social circle. Too many people knew him. And then she did the dumbest thing imaginable. She got a hotel room in our city, not an hour away, 10 minutes from her own house. It was reckless. It was amateur. A phone call came from another friend in our group. Her voice was shaking. Sue's husband found them. He burst into the room. My first feeling wasn't sympathy. It was white-hot anger. She broke the code. She put us all at risk because she couldn't keep her head on straight. I later found out he caught them before anything had even really happened. They were just talking, maybe a few kisses. And for that, she let him blow up the world. Then came the news about the hospital. A complete mental breakdown. It was all so dramatic, so over the top. Instead of managing the situation, owning her mistake, and controlling the damage, she just fell apart. She let the guilt turn her into a victim, a damsel in distress, who needed her husband to rescue her from a mess she made herself. When she got out, she wasn't the same. It was like her husband had spent her entire hospital stay reprogramming her. She wasn't our Sue anymore. She was his soldier. I got another panicked call. She's going to tell them. She's going to tell all the husbands everything. I drove straight to her house. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely grip the steering wheel. This wasn't about honesty. This was revenge. She was ashamed of what she did, and she wanted to make sure we were all just as miserable as she was. I found her in the kitchen packing a box with Frank's old gifts. She looked pale, but her eyes were hard. "Sue, don't do this," I said. My voice was calm, reasonable. I wasn't there to yell. I was there to talk her down. You made a mistake. A small one. You don't have to burn down the whole village to put out the fire in your own house. She just stared at me. Tell your husband what you need to, I said, leaning forward. But tell my husband a light version. Just say we went out for drinks sometimes, that we complained about our marriages. You don't have to destroy my family to save your own. That's not what friends do. We protect each other. From the corner of my eye, I could see her husband's shadow in the hallway. He was listening to every word. Sue looked at me, then looked towards the shadow, and a decision settled on her face. "No, Betty," she said, her voice flat. "He deserves to know the whole truth. They all do. She chose him. She threw all of us into the fire to prove her loyalty to the man she had just betrayed. I walked out of that house knowing my life was over. She wasn't just a friend who got caught. She was an informant. I've been waiting for 2 days. Every time the phone rings, my heart stops. Every time I see Mark's car headlights sweep across the living room window, I feel sick. He just got home from work. I can hear his keys jangling as he puts them in the little bowl by the door. He's walking down the hall now. He stopped outside the kitchen. He knows. He must know. He stepped into the kitchen, not looking at me, but at the counter. A kid's drawing stuck to the fridge, the grocery list I'd written that morning. His movements were slow, deliberate. He took off his watch and placed it by the sink. It was the same thing he did every single night, and the routine of it felt like a punch to the gut. "Sue's husband called me at work today," he said. His voice was completely flat. No anger, no emotion, just a statement of fact. It was so much worse than yelling. He told me quite a story, Betty. I opened my mouth to say something, anything. To spin it, to soften it, to manage it. But what could I say? I'd already rehearsed the light version in my head 100 times, but Sue had taken that option away from me. "Mark, we need to talk," I started, my own voice sounding weak and pathetic. "No," he said, finally turning to look at me. His eyes were empty. I had spent years feeling invisible, and now being truly seen by him was terrifying. "There's nothing to talk about. He told me everything. He had names, places, for 4 years. He shook his head, a small, tired movement. 4 years you've been living this other life while I was? What, paying the mortgage, coaching Little League? It wasn't like that, I pleaded. It didn't mean anything. It was just something for me. I was so unhappy, Mark. I felt like I was disappearing. For the first time, a flicker of something crossed his face. It was a raw, wounded anger. You were unhappy. You felt like you were disappearing. Did you ever think to tell me that? Did you ever once come to me and say, Mark, I feel lonely? Or was it just easier to go find some ghost from high school to make you feel special? He knew the name. Of course he knew the name. Sue had given him a full manifest of our sins. She'd left nothing out. This house, the kids, our life. You thought it was boring? He continued, his voice getting a little louder now. I thought it was what we wanted. I thought we were a team. I come home every day to this. To you. And all this time you were coming home from... where? A spa hotel. He said the words spa hotel like they were poison. Was it fun? Did you have a good time laughing about your boring husband with your fun friends? The words hit me harder than a slap. He was twisting it, making it sound sordid and cheap. He couldn't understand. "You don't get it," I shot back, the frustration boiling over. "I was drowning, and this was a life raft. It made me a better mother, a better wife. I was happy when I came home." "A better wife?" He let out a short, bitter laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "You were a liar. A great liar, I'll give you that. For 4 years. That's not a better wife, Betty. That's a better actress." He walked over to the kitchen table and sat down heavily in one of the chairs. He looked old. He looked like a stranger. "I called a lawyer on my way home," he said quietly. "He's drawing up the papers. I want you to pack a bag. I'll stay at my brother's for a few days to give you time to figure out where you're going. I don't want the kids to see this." The finality of it stole the air from my lungs. "Mark, no. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. Don't throw away our entire life because of a mistake." A mistake. He stood up, and now the anger was fully there, his face red. "A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk. A mistake is bouncing a check. What you did, what you all did, was a conspiracy. You built a whole secret society based on lies and betrayal. And you were the queen? That's what he called you. The queen bee." There it was. The brand Sue had seared onto my forehead. I couldn't defend myself against it. To him, I wasn't his wife anymore. I was a cartoon villain. I was the mastermind who ruined everyone's lives. He walked past me and went upstairs. I stood alone in the kitchen, listening to the sounds of him opening drawers, the rustle of clothes. He was packing. Not me. He was leaving tonight. The house was suddenly huge and silent. The life I had resented for being so predictable was gone, and all I felt was a terrifying cold emptiness. I packed a small overnight bag in a daze. I didn't cry. I felt numb, like I was watching a movie about someone else. As I was walking out the door, my phone buzzed. It was a text from one of the other girls, Karen. Asterisk. My husband knows. He's kicking me out. This is all your fault. Asterisk. Another one came in right after from Lisa. Asterisk. Sue is a traitor and you are a fool. You ruined us. Asterisk. The club was officially disbanded. The women I had tried to liberate were now just a firing squad, and I was their only target. I drove to the only place I could think of, a cheap motel off the highway with a flickering neon sign. The room smelled like stale smoke and sadness. I sat on the edge of the stiff bed, the ugly floral bedspread scratching my legs. This was my new freedom. Not a spa day and a long lunch, but a lonely room with thin walls and a view of a parking lot. I thought I was being smart. I thought I had found a way to have it all, to balance the suffocating reality with a little bit of fantasy. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I was just trying to survive. My only real mistake was trusting someone as weak as Sue. She couldn't handle the pressure. When her little fantasy world blew up, she decided to take a torch to everyone else's. She confessed to save her own marriage, to cleanse her own guilt, and she sacrificed 3 other families to do it. People will say I got what I deserved, that my husband was right to leave me, that my friends are right to blame me. Maybe they are. But as I sit here in the buzzing silence of this awful room, I can't help but think that I didn't ask for this. I just wanted to breathe. I opened a window for a little fresh air, and Sue decided to burn the whole house to the ground with all of us still inside. She didn't just get caught. She took a plea deal and turned state's evidence on the rest of us. And now I'm here, free from my cage at last, with absolutely nothing left.
Story teen.
All right, I know how I sound. I'm the bad guy in this story, the monster who broke an amazing girl's heart. I get it. I see the comments, I hear what people say, but you're only getting her side of it. You weren't there for the 4 years of silence, the quiet moments in the dark when I felt like I was suffocating. Let's go back to the beginning. I was 26, she was 20. We were 2 months in that perfect honeymoon phase where everything is easy and you think you've found the one. We were lying in bed just talking, and she told me, just like that, I can't have kids. She said it was something with her ovaries. I don't remember the medical term. All I remember is how scared she looked, waiting for me to run. And what was I supposed to do? I was 26. Kids were this vague, distant idea like a mortgage or a retirement plan. It was a problem for some other guy, some future version of me. The person in front of me, though, she was real. She was funny and smart and lit up every room she walked into. So I did what any guy would do when the woman he's falling for is crying in his arms. I held her and I told her it didn't matter. We'll figure it out, I said. We can adopt, there are other ways. Asterisk. You times are what matters. And I swear to God in that moment I meant every word. But promises you make when you're 26 don't always hold up. When you turn 28, then 30, life starts happening around you. My friends, the guys I grew up with, started getting married. Then came the pregnancy announcements. The texts with ultrasound pictures, the gender reveal parties. Every single one felt like a punch to the gut. I'd smile, I'd say congratulations, I'd buy a gift from the registry. But inside, I felt like I was attending a funeral for a life I always just assumed I would have. The life where I teach my own son how to throw a baseball, where I see my own eyes looking back at me from a little girl's face. I started staying up late, sitting on the couch after she went to bed, just scrolling through my phone. It wasn't because I was looking for someone else, not then. It was because I couldn't stand lying next to her in the quiet, knowing that the one thing my entire being was screaming for was the one thing we could never, ever have together. I was living in a future that wasn't mine. She'd catch me texting old friends and get paranoid. She called me insecure, said I was looking for validation. It wasn't insecurity. It was claustrophobia. I had made a silent deal 4 years earlier, and the walls were closing in. I didn't know how to tell her I was drowning without shattering the person I loved most. The trip to California was supposed to fix things. A reset button. But she paid for most of it, which just made me feel worse. It was another reminder that I wasn't the man I was supposed to be. I felt kept. Cared for, but not like a partner. More like a project. Then I met someone. It was at a bar, just a random conversation. We talked for hours. It wasn't some movie-style romance. It was just easy. There were no landmines in the conversation. No heavy future hanging over us. For one night, I wasn't the guy with a tragic, complicated love story. I was just a normal guy. It was a breath of fresh air after holding my breath for years. We went back to her hotel. I know. There's no excuse for it. It was a cowardly, selfish thing to do. Of course she found out. I left my email open. She saw the hotel confirmation. The fight was awful. The breakup was worse. But underneath all the guilt and the pain, there was a tiny, shameful feeling of relief. I was free from the promise. But the silence that followed was a different kind of hell. For 3 months, I was miserable. I really did love her. I loved times, her times the person. The way she laughed, the way she looked at me. I tried so hard to convince myself that she could be enough. That I could be the kind of man who didn't need his own kids. That our love could fill that hole. I was desperate to be that man for her. So I did something crazy. I booked a flight to Georgia where she'd moved to be with her family. I didn't even tell her I was coming. It was this huge grand gesture, the kind you see in movies, but it wasn't just about winning her back. It was about winning myself back. It was a final all-or-nothing gamble to force my own heart to accept the life I had chosen. I showed up on her doorstep and she was shocked. We cried, we talked for hours. I told her I couldn't live without her. And to prove it, to build something new, I got her a surprise. A little golden retriever puppy. We named her Nova. I thought, this is it. This is our practice family. A puppy could be our baby. I poured every last drop of hope I had into that little dog. This could work. We could have our own kind of normal. For a while it did feel normal. We were happy. We took Nova to the park, we trained her, we took 1,000,000 pictures. She was this little ball of life and energy in our apartment. But a puppy can't fix a crack in your foundation. After a few months, the old feelings started creeping back in. The quiet dread in the middle of the night. The pang of jealousy when I saw a dad with his kid at the grocery store. Nova was a beautiful, amazing distraction, but she was still a distraction. The void was still there. Then I met someone else. Here, back home. At work. Again, it was the easiness that got me. She talked about wanting a big family someday, about what she'd name her kids. And instead of feeling that familiar dread, I felt a spark of hope. It was a feeling I hadn't realized I'd lost. Being with her felt like stepping back onto the path I was always meant to be on. It was wrong, I know how wrong it was. To be sneaking around behind my girlfriend's back. But it felt like coming home to myself. I started getting careless. staying out later, making up flimsy excuses. My girlfriend knew something was up. She was getting that same look in her eyes she had before California. That insecure, suspicious look that I hated because I knew I was the one causing it. Tonight, I was leaving the new woman's house. I told my girlfriend I was out with friends. I walked her to her door, and under the porch light, I gave her a quick kiss goodbye. It was nothing, just a peck, but it felt like a betrayal. I told her I'd text her when I got home. I turned around, walked down her driveway, and pulled my phone out of my pocket to order an Uber. Just as I unlocked the screen, a notification popped up. A text from my girlfriend. My heart stopped. It wasn't a question. It wasn't an angry message. It was just 2 words. Turn around. I looked down at the words on my screen, and for a second, my brain just went blank. It didn't make sense. It was like a message from a different reality bleeding into mine. Turn around. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, ready to type back a confused what or wrong person, but I knew. A cold dread, heavy and sick, filled my stomach. I knew. Slowly, like I was moving through water, I turned. And there she was. Standing at the end of the driveway, illuminated by the streetlights. She was just standing there, her arms wrapped around herself, her car parked crookedly at the curb behind her. She must have used that Find My iPhone thing. My 2 worlds, the one where I was building a future, and the one I was trying to escape, had just crashed into each other right here on this quiet suburban street. Her face was a mess. Tears were streaming down it, but she wasn't making a sound. The silence was 1,000 times worse than screaming. I felt a weird sense of detachment, like I was watching a movie. I saw myself walking toward her, the sound of gravel crunching under my shoes. I saw the way she flinched when I got close. "What are you doing here?" I asked. It was the dumbest question I could have possibly asked. That's what broke the dam. "What am I doing here?" she finally shrieked, her voice cracking. "What were you doing? I saw you. I saw you kiss her." I didn't have an answer. There was no good lie left. No excuse big enough to cover this. I was just tired. So tired of the performance of juggling the lies and the half-truths. I was exhausted from trying to be 2 different men at once. I wasn't even angry at her for tracking me. In a twisted way, I was almost relieved that it was over. The lie had imploded. "Who is she?" she sobbed, punching my chest weakly. "It didn't even hurt." "Why? After everything, after Georgia, after Nova, why would you do this again?" She kept asking why. Why? And every why was a nail hammering down on the coffin of the life we'd tried to build. My brain was empty. There was nothing to say that wouldn't destroy her more. But she wouldn't stop. She grabbed the front of my shirt, her knuckles white. "Look at me and tell me why." And the truth, the ugly, horrible 4-year-old truth that I had choked on for so long, just fell out of me. Because I can get things with her that I can't have with you. The words hung in the air between us, colder and sharper than the night air. I watched the last bit of light go out in her eyes. It was like I had physically struck her. Her hands dropped from my shirt. She just stared at me, her mouth slightly open, and then she let out this sound. A kind of wounded whimper that I will never forget as long as I live. It was the cruelest thing I've ever said to anyone. But it was also the most honest I had been in our entire relationship. It was the confession I was too much of a coward to ever say in a quiet room, so it came out here, under a streetlight like poison. She didn't say another word. She just turned, walked back to her car like a zombie, and drove away. I just stood there in the middle of the road and watched her taillights disappear. The breakup was quiet after that. We were past the screaming phase. She packed her things while I stayed at a friend's house. A few days later, I came back to an apartment that was half empty and completely silent. All that was left of her was Nova, sitting by the door whining and waiting for her to come back. I dove headfirst into my new relationship. It felt like a lifeboat. I told the new woman everything, framing it as a tragic, impossible situation I had finally escaped. She was sympathetic. She saw me as a guy who had just wanted a normal life. And I clung to that. We moved fast. I proposed 2 months later. It wasn't just about love. It was about survival. I had to lock it in. I had to build the walls of this new future so high and so fast that I wouldn't have a chance to look back, to lose my nerve, and fall back into the guilt and the memory of what I had done. I needed to make the choice permanent before my own weakness undid it. But there was still Nova. Every time I looked at her, I saw my ex's face the day I brought her home. I saw that brief, hopeful period in Georgia where I really truly tried to make it work. The puppy was a living, breathing monument to our failure. She was a constant reminder of the beautiful, broken family we tried to be. I'd be playing with her in the living room, and my fiancé would talk about what color to paint the nursery someday, and I'd feel this wave of nausea. The two things couldn't exist in the same space. I knew I couldn't keep her. My fiancé loved her, of course. She'd always wanted a dog. One night we were talking about getting our own place, and she said, "And of course we're taking Nova, she's our first baby." And that's when it clicked in my head, a final selfish piece of logic. Giving Nova to my ex was a symbol of our new beginning. A placeholder. Now I had to take that symbol back. I had to move it from the failed column to the future column. So I gave Nova to my fiancé. Officially. I bought her a new collar with a little tag with my fiancé's number on it. I told myself it wasn't about hurting my ex. It wasn't a final act of cruelty. It was a transfer. A symbolic transfer of hope. It was me taking the one good thing from that wreckage and planting it in new soil, hoping it would grow into the family I always wanted. It was me, finally and completely letting go of one future to claim another. I know how it looks. I know I'm the villain. I broke her heart. I lied. I cheated, and then I took the dog. I get it. But for 4 years, I felt like I was holding my breath. pretending I was okay with a future that was killing a part of me. Maybe a better man could have done it. A stronger, more noble man could have let his own dreams die for the woman he loved. But I'm not that. I was suffocating and I chose to breathe. And I will have to live with the fact that my fresh air was her poison.
Story 11.
I know what you think of me. You've probably heard her side, and I don't blame you for hating me. I hate me too. Most of the time I look in the mirror and I don't recognize the man staring back. But I need you to understand, I never wanted to hurt her. Everything I did, all the good things, they were real. They were my desperate attempt to be the man she deserved. Our wedding in 2016, that was supposed to be it for me. The end of the old life and the start of a new one. Before her, I was just a mess. Always anxious, always feeling like I was playing a part, waiting for someone to call me out as a fake. She was the first person who made me feel real. When she looked at me, I felt like the man I always wanted to be. So I decided I would be him. I would be a husband, a good stable man. Every good memory we made was another brick I was putting in a wall. I was trying to wall off the broken part of myself, the part that craved noise and chaos and destruction. The first year of our marriage was good. We were happy. But in the quiet moments when the TV was off and she was asleep next to me, I'd hear it. A little whisper in the back of my head, telling me I was a fraud, that I didn't deserve any of this, that a good man wouldn't feel this restless emptiness. The only thing that made the voice shut up was drinking. A few beers, a glass of whiskey, and suddenly I was him again, the charming, confident guy she fell in love with. The guy who wasn't terrified all the time. The first time it happened was about 4 months after the wedding, with her best friend. I swear to God it wasn't a plan. It was late, we were all drunk, and it was just a stupid, horrible mistake. The next morning, the shame was so heavy I could barely breathe. It should have been the biggest wake-up call of my life. It should have scared me straight, but it didn't. It did something worse. It broke my brain. The guilt was too much. The man who loved my wife, the man who held her and promised her forever, couldn't have done that. It was impossible. So my mind just split. It created a box, and it put the monster who did that thing inside it. From that day on, there were two of me. There was the husband who loved his wife more than anything, and there was the other guy, the addict. The addict didn't care about anything but the fix. He was fueled by booze and that bottomless pit of self-hatred I carried around. The cheating wasn't about sex, not really. It was about feeling something, anything other than the shame. It was a quick hit of adrenaline, a moment of validation from a stranger online, or an escort who didn't know me. It was a way to prove the voice in my head. Right, I was a piece of garbage. Each time, the addict would get his fix. And then I'd wake up the next morning as the husband again, swimming in disgust and fear. And I would throw myself even harder into being the perfect husband. I'd cook her favorite dinner plan, a surprise weekend trip, tell her how much I loved her. I was praying, just praying that if I acted the part well enough, it would eventually kill the other guy for good. Some of the worst times were when she was right there. I remember one of our house parties. She was in the living room with our friends laughing. and I was in our bedroom with someone else. People think that's a sign of a guy who wants to get caught. It's not. It's the addict's recklessness. When the monster needed a fix, the rest of the world just went blurry. My wife, my home, my entire life would just become background noise. The only thing that was real was the chase. Then she got pregnant, and we bought the house. This was it. This was the final move, the ultimate fortification. A baby. Our own home. A real family. I was so genuinely happy, so full of hope. I thought, this has to be enough. A life this good, this real. It has to be heavy enough to crush the monster, to starve him out for good. And for a while, it worked. The voice went quiet. I wasn't drinking as much. I was just focused on her, on the baby, on painting the nursery and building the crib. I really, truly believed I had won. I was going to be a father. I was going to be the man I was always meant to be. We were 3 months pregnant boxes, still half unpacked in our dream house, and I had never felt more certain about anything in my life. I was safe. We were safe. We were sitting on the couch looking at something on my phone together. I think it was a list of baby names. I was laughing, and I felt her head resting on my shoulder. It was one of those perfect quiet moments. And then the screen lit up. A notification banner slid down from the top. It was a message from a name she didn't know. And the preview was just a few words, but it was enough. My blood went cold. The whole world just stopped. I saw her eyes flick from the baby names up to the banner. I watched her read the words. I watched her perfect happy face start to crumble in slow motion. The wall I'd spent our entire marriage building was about to be vaporized. She pulled her head off my shoulder and just stared at the screen for a second. Then she looked at me, her expression completely blank. "Who is that?" she asked. My brain went into overdrive, trying to spin 1,000 lies in a single second. It's a coworker. It's spam. It's a wrong number. But I couldn't get a single word out. My mouth was dry. I just looked at her. And she knew. The way she pulled away from me, just that little bit of distance she created on the couch, felt like a canyon opening up between us. The interrogation that followed wasn't shouting and screaming. It was worse. It was quiet. It was methodical. She took my phone and her hands were perfectly steady. She asked me again, her voice flat. Who is she? I started with the first lie, the one I had practiced in my head just in case. A stupid flirtation, a mistake it meant nothing. I watched her scroll through my phone, her thumb moving up the screen, and with every swipe another piece of my life fell away. She found more. More names. More messages. Every question she asked was a nail. And every lie I told was just the hammer driving it in deeper. The demolition went on for hours. She'd find something, ask me about it. I'd minimize it, and then she'd find something else that proved I was lying. The worst part was when she found the messages from 4 months after our wedding from her best friend. I watched her face go from hurt to confused. and then to a look of such profound betrayal that it physically hurt to see. She didn't cry, not then. She just looked at me like I was a complete stranger. Like she was seeing the monster for the first time. She found the emails with the escort, the dating app profiles, the chats. All the bricks from the wall I had built came crashing down, and I was just sitting there buried in the rubble. Finally, she put the phone down on the coffee table. She stood up, walked to the front door, and opened it. "Get out," she said. It was the first time her voice broke. Being kicked out of my own home, the one we had just bought for our baby, should have been the lowest point of my life. But it was a relief. I deserved it. I deserved worse. I slept in my car for 2 nights before getting a cheap motel room. I spent days in a fog just replaying that night over and over, seeing her face. That's when I finally did the one thing I should have done years ago. I walked into an AA meeting. Then I found an SA meeting. Sitting in those church basements listening to other people tell my story was the first time I didn't feel completely alone with the monster. These people understood the switch. They understood the craving, the self-hatred, the double life. It wasn't an excuse, but it was an explanation. It was a path. I started working the steps. I was sober. I was going to meetings every day. I was finally, for the first time, being honest with myself about who I was. After a few weeks, she called. The dog was having a hard time without me, and with her being pregnant, she needed help. She said I could come back, but I had to stay in the guest room. No exceptions. It was the tiniest sliver of hope, and I grabbed it with both hands. I moved into the guest room and followed her rules perfectly. I respected her space. I didn't push. I just tried to be useful to show her I was changing. I went to my meetings, I did my work, and I just wanted to be near her, to be near the goodness I had almost completely destroyed. I thought maybe, just maybe, we could survive this. I was making progress. But the addict is a patient bastard. It waits. It hides in the corners and waits for you to be tired or lonely or weak. And one night it found me. I was sitting alone in the guest room, scrolling on my laptop. She was asleep down the hall. I was just lonely. That's all it took. I wasn't even looking for anything. I was on LinkedIn, for Christ's sake. A stupid professional networking site. A message popped up. An old contact. And the conversation just turned. The switch flipped. It was fast, almost instant. The monster took over, and before I really knew what was happening, it was done. An online relapse. The shame was immediate and crushing. It was 10 times worse than before, because this time I knew better. I was in recovery. I was supposed to be getting well. I hid it. I deleted the messages and shut the laptop, my heart pounding. I told myself it was a one-time slip. A mistake. I could handle it. I could get back on track without telling her. Telling her would destroy that sliver of hope, and I couldn't bear that. But we had a formal disclosure scheduled with our marriage counselor. A big, terrifying meeting where I was supposed to lay out every single secret, every single betrayal once and for all. No more trickled truth. The week leading up to it was torture. I knew I had to either tell her about the LinkedIn slip-up, or I had to start our new foundation with another lie. We sat in the counselor's office, my wife looking so fragile but so determined. I started talking. I went through the timeline, all the ugly details I'd hidden before. And then I got to the part about coming home, about living in the guest room. I took a breath, looked at her, and I knew what I was about to do. It was like holding a grenade and knowing I had to pull the pin. I told her about the relapse. I watched the last bit of hope drain from her eyes. It was one thing to be betrayed by the man I was before. It was another thing entirely to be betrayed by the man who was supposedly in recovery, the man who was trying to heal with her. I hadn't just cheated on her again. I had let her start to hope, let her invest in my recovery, only to prove that I was still the same broken, untrustworthy person. I had poisoned the wound she was just starting to clean. I saw it all clearly then. My greatest failure wasn't all the affairs. It wasn't the lies or the drinking. My greatest failure was ever believing I could build a life strong enough to protect her, while the thing she needed protection from was living inside my own skin. I had just let him out right in front of her one last time.
Story 12.
I know what you think of me. My daughter Chloe has probably told you the whole story, and she's probably made me sound like the worst person in the world. And maybe I am. But you've only heard her side. You haven't heard what it's like to live in this house, this perfect, stable house that's built on a foundation of lies. They call us stable now. That's the word everyone uses. Oh, you two have done so well to get through it. You're so stable. It makes me want to laugh or maybe throw something. Stable is just another word for quiet. It's the quiet you get after a bomb goes off and you're just sitting in the rubble too stunned to move. The bomb went off 2 years ago. My husband, Mark, the man everyone thinks is a saint for working so hard, sat me down and told me he had a secret. I thought it was another woman. I almost wished it was. It would have been simpler. No, he told me he'd gambled away our savings, our future, everything we had worked for. 100,000 pounds. Just gone. Poof. Like it was never there. The shock was so total I couldn't even cry at first. It was just this cold, heavy weight in my stomach. But the world doesn't stop for your pain. We had to tell the kids. We had to tell our families. And that's when the story changed. It wasn't about what he did to us anymore. It became the story of Mark's redemption. Everyone rallied around times him, asterisk. His parents, my parents, our friends. He's a good man who made a mistake. He's so brave for admitting it. You have to support him. He's trying so hard to fix it. And what was I supposed to do? I was the wife. My job was to smile, nod, and be the supportive rock while he climbed out of the hole he'd thrown us all into. So I did. I played my part. But forgiveness isn't a switch you can just flip. Forgiveness became my prison. Every time he came home late from his second job, exhausted, and someone would say how amazing he was for working to pay it all back, something inside me would just shrivel up and die. He was being praised for cleaning up a mess times he made asterisk. He got to be the hero of his own story. I just got to live with the consequences, the constant fear about money, the shame. I got to be a supporting character in the grand drama of his recovery. My own mother died last year. The grief was a physical thing. It felt like I couldn't breathe. But in this house, there was only room for one person's suffering, and Mark was still taking up all the space. His guilt was louder than my grief. So I packed my sadness away, just like I packed away my anger. That's when the drinking got worse. A glass of wine with dinner turned into 2, then 3. It was the only thing that could blur the edges of my life. It turned down the volume on the silence in our house. Mark and I didn't talk anymore. Not really. We'd talk about bills, about Chloe, about what to have for dinner. But the laughter was gone. The easy comfort was gone. He'd walk into a room and all the air would just get sucked out. The wine helped me pretend I couldn't feel it. And then someone else started talking to me. It started innocently. Just a few texts from an old colleague I ran into. He was funny. He asked about my day. He didn't know me as Mark's wife, the poor woman whose husband gambled their life away. He didn't see the tired, resentful woman I saw in the mirror. He just saw me. He told me I was beautiful. He said I was sexy. He sent pictures and asked for them back. It was all a fantasy, I knew that. It wasn't love. It was just light. A tiny secret flicker of light in a very dark room. My phone became my escape. It was the one place in the world that was only mine where someone desired me instead of pitying me. Tonight, the wine was doing its job perfectly. I was on the sofa, feeling warm and floaty, smiling at a stupid joke he'd sent me. I was in my little secret world, a world where I wasn't a failure or a victim. I felt a shadow pass over me and looked up. It was Chloe. She was standing in the doorway to the kitchen just watching me. She's been looking at me like that for months. Like I'm a puzzle she can't solve, or maybe one she's already figured out and doesn't like the answer to. I saw the disgust on her face before she could hide it. I instinctively angled my phone away from her, my heart thumping. It felt like an invasion. Her judgment was a physical thing pushing into my private space. She didn't move. She just stood there, her arms crossed. "Who are you always texting?" she asked. Her voice was flat, an accusation. My brain went completely blank. Panic, hot and sharp, shot through me. "No one," I said too quickly. "Just my therapist." A clumsy, stupid lie. I don't even have a therapist. She just stared at me, her eyes narrowed. She knew I was lying. She took a step closer. "Let me see then." "No," I said, my voice shaking. "It's private, Chloe. Get off my back." I tried to sound angry, but it came out as desperate. I clutched the phone tighter. This was mine. He had taken our money, our future. She wasn't going to take this from me, too. And then she did it. She moved so fast I didn't have time to react. She lunged forward and snatched the phone right out of my hands. A switch flipped. I saw red. It was a purely animal instinct. I scrambled off the sofa, grabbing for her arm for the phone. "Give it back!" I yelled, my voice ragged. "Give it back to me right now!" We stumbled a clumsy, ugly dance in the middle of the living room. I wasn't trying to hurt her. I was just trying to get my lifeline back. To protect the one small, selfish thing that made me feel alive. She was stronger. She shoved me back and I tripped over the rug, catching myself on the armchair. She stood there, panting, phone in her hand. Her back was to me. I was frozen, my breath caught in my throat, watching the straight, unforgiving line of her shoulders. I waited for her to turn around to scream at me. But she didn't. She just lifted the phone, her thumb moving across the screen that was still lit up from my last message. I saw her sharp intake of breath. Her whole body went rigid. I couldn't see her face, but I didn't need to. I knew in that gut-wrenching, world-ending moment that she was seeing it all. The texts, the names he called me, the photos. My secret was no longer mine. The silence in the room was so loud it felt like my ears were ringing. It couldn't have been more than a few seconds, but it stretched on forever. I watched her shoulders, how they shook just once. Then she slowly turned around. The look on her face, it wasn't just anger. It was disgust. It was the same look I'd seen her give Mark just once, right after he told us about the gambling. A look that said times, "I don't even know who you are anymore." Asterisk. "Mom." Her voice was a whisper. It cracked. "What is this? Who is this?" She held the phone out, like it was a dead thing she'd found. I couldn't speak. The whine, the panic, the shame, it was all a thick sludge in my throat. I just stared at her, my mind screaming for the right words, but nothing came out. And then the performance started. Her face crumpled. A huge theatrical sob ripped out of her, the kind that's meant to be heard. She clutched her stomach as if she'd been physically wounded. "How could you?" she wailed, her voice rising with every word. "How could you do this to Dad? After everything times he's done to fix this family." She was choosing a side. Right there in that moment. She wasn't my daughter horrified for her mother. She was his defender accusing me. And something inside me, something that had been quietly rotting for 2 years, finally snapped. Him, I practically spat the word. "You're worried about times him, asterisk. He's been killing himself, working 2 jobs for us," she screamed back, tears streaming down her face. "To pay back the money he times lost," I screamed right back, finally finding my voice. It was raw, ugly. "The money he stole from us, from you and me? Don't you dare stand there and act like he's a saint." She just shook her head, sobbing, looking at me like I was a monster. She didn't hear a word I said. She didn't want to. It was easier to have one good guy and one bad guy. And I just made it very easy for her to decide who was who. She turned and ran out of the living room. Not to her bedroom. No, she ran straight to the study where Mark was on his laptop, probably working through the accounts playing the martyr. I heard her burst in, heard her choked sobs. Dad, you have to see this. That was it. The final betrayal. She took my one secret, my one ugly little escape, and she handed it directly to the man who created the prison I was trying to escape from. She didn't just expose me. She sacrificed me to protect him. All those years of bedtime, stories, packed lunches, scraped knees, all of it meant nothing. I was the enemy now. I followed her. I don't even know what I was planning to do. Mark was standing up, his face pale and confused Chloe, shoving my phone into his hands. He looked from the phone to me, his expression unreadable. Not angry, just hollow. All the fight went out of me. But then Chloe turned to me again, her face righteous and furious. "You're disgusting," she said, her voice dripping with poison. The anger came back hot and wild. It was pure hurt. "Get out of my face," I slurred the words, thick with wine and rage. "You're such an a-hole, you know that." "What is wrong with you?" she cried. F off, Chloe. Just F off and leave me alone, I pointed a shaking finger at her. "You have no idea what you've just done." She flinched like I'd hit her. Mark finally spoke, his voice quiet and dead. "Go to your room, Chloe." He didn't look at me. He just kept staring at the phone screen, at the proof of what I was. I turned and walked away. I went to the kitchen and poured another glass of wine. My hands shaking so badly, some of it sloshed onto the counter. I didn't care. I drank it down in 3 gulps and poured another. I could hear them talking in low voices, his deep and rumbling, hers high and hysterical. They were a team now. It was them against me. The next morning, my head felt like it was splitting in 2, but that was nothing compared to the gaping hole in my chest. The house was silent. Not the usual quiet, but a heavy, deliberate silence. I found Chloe in the kitchen making toast her back to me. She moved with a stiff, deliberate anger. I had to try. I had to make her understand. "Chloe," I said, my voice hoarse. She didn't turn around. "Can we please talk?" She kept buttering her toast. "There's nothing to talk about." "Yes, there is." I took a step closer. My heart was pounding. What I did was wrong, I know that. But I need you to understand why. I was begging. You know what betrayal feels like. You remember. You remember how you felt when your dad told us about the gambling? I was hoping she would see the connection, the parallel. I wasn't excusing what I did. I was trying to give it a reason, a source. I was trying to tell her that this sickness in our family didn't start with me. It started with him. She finally turned around, her eyes cold. "Don't you dare," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "Don't you dare compare what you did to what Dad did. He made a mistake. He was sick. You You did this on purpose. To hurt him. It wasn't about him, I cried, my voice cracking. It had nothing to do with him, can't you see? It was about me. About feeling like I mattered for 5 seconds in a day. I reached out, wanting to hug her, to hold my little girl, and make her see me. Please, honey. She flinched away from my hand so violently. It was like I'd burned her. She took a step back, holding her toast like a shield. Her eyes were hard. The verdict was in them. I was guilty. There was no appeal. That was the moment I knew I had lost her. Maybe forever. The coldness in her gaze was the final blow. It told me everything. I was alone. Condemned in my own house by my own child. The two people I had spent my life building a world for had now built a wall to keep me out. I just nodded. There was nothing left to say. I turned around without another word and went upstairs. They can have their story. The one where he's the redeemed hero and I'm the villain who tried to tear it all down. They can have their quiet, stable house. I'm done. I'm done trying to hold the walls together. There's nothing left inside worth protecting anyway.
Story 13.
I'm the ex-girlfriend who took the wedding money. I know what you've all probably heard, and I know how it sounds. I'm the crazy, cheating girl who emptied our joint account to run off with some guy I met in a video game. I get it. It sounds terrible. But you've only heard his side of the story. You heard about the numbers, the bank statements. You haven't heard about the 6 years before that, or the 1 year that broke everything. For 6 years, Mark and I were a team. Not just a couple, a team. We did everything together. We finished each other's sentences, we knew each other's takeout orders by heart, and we planned our whole future on a dozen napkins in our favorite diner. We were going to get married, buy a small house with a yard for a dog, and just be happy. It was simple, and it was all I ever wanted. Then came the job offer in September 2019. It was a huge opportunity for him, a major step up in his career. The only catch was that it was in a city 5 hours away. He sold it to me as a sacrifice. This is for us, he'd say, holding my hands. I'll work like crazy for a few years. We'll save up and we can have the wedding of our dreams. It's for our future. I believed him. I loved him, so of course I believed him. So he moved. And I stayed behind in our apartment, the one we'd picked out together. At first it was hard, but manageable. He'd come home every other weekend, and we'd have a flurry of dates and catch-up sessions before he had to leave again. But the job was demanding. The 1-2 hour shifts he'd mentioned weren't an exaggeration. Soon every other weekend became once a month if I'm lucky. The phone calls changed too. They went from long late-night talks about our feelings and our day to quick 5-minute check-ins while he was on his break. He was always tired. He'd ask how I was, but before I could really answer, he'd launch into a story about his work, his boss, his projects, the annoying guy in the next cubicle. I became a sounding board for his new life, a life I had no part in. Meanwhile, I was living in a museum of our old life. His stuff was still in the closet. His favorite mug was still in the cabinet. and I was supposed to be planning our dream wedding. Alone. I picked the venue by myself, sending him blurry photos for his approval. I went to cake tasting and brought home little boxes of samples to eat by myself on the couch. I spent hours on the phone with caterers and florists, making decisions for a party of 2 when one of us wasn't even there. The big, beautiful wedding binder he bought me sat on the coffee table, a constant reminder of the future I was building by myself. I wasn't his partner anymore. I felt like his project manager. The loneliness was the worst part. It was like a constant, low hum in the background of my life. It was there when I woke up in our two-big bed, and when I came home from work to a dark, quiet apartment. To fill the silence, I started playing this stupid city-building game on my phone. It was just a way to pass the time, to turn my brain off for a few hours. The game had a global chat feature, and that's where I met him. I'm not even going to use his name because he isn't the point. He was just a guy from another country who happened to be online when I was. It started with tips about the game, but soon we were just talking. He'd ask about my day, and he would actually listen to the answer. He thought my wedding planning stories were funny, not boring. He made me laugh. He was just there. He was present in a way Mark hadn't been for a year. It wasn't some magical whirlwind romance. It was just a conversation. It was a lifeline. I felt like I had been holding my breath for a year, and he was the first person who told me it was okay to breathe. The realization that my relationship with Mark was over didn't come in one big moment. It was a slow, painful death. The final straw was when I called him excited because I thought I'd found the perfect band for the wedding. He cut me off mid-sentence. "Babe, I can't talk about this right now. I'm swamped. Just pick whichever one you think is best. I trust you." He thought he was empowering me. But what I heard was, "I don't care." I ended things a week later over the phone. It was awful. I tried to explain the distance, the loneliness, how I felt like we were just business partners managing a long-distance project called Our Future. I told him I'd connected with someone else, someone who actually saw me. Of course, all he heard was that I was leaving him for a guy I met in a game. He called me delusional. He said I was throwing away 6 years for a fantasy. Maybe he was right. But our relationship already felt like a fantasy. The only difference was my new one didn't make me feel so alone. After we hung up, I just sat there numb. Then I remembered the account. Our joint wedding savings account. I logged in, my hands shaking. The balance was a little over $6, 200. I looked at that number and I didn't see the money he'd worked so hard for. I saw my time. I saw every single night. I cried myself to sleep. Every dinner I ate alone. Every time I had to answer the question, "So when's the big day?" with a fake smile. I saw the 6 years of my life I'd poured into a future that had just vanished. In that moment, something inside me just snapped. He had his new career, his new life. He was moving forward. What was I left with? An empty apartment and a wedding binder full of broken promises. The money felt like the only tangible thing I had left from our relationship. It wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about worth. He thought a few monthly transfers into an account made up for his absence. I felt like I was owed for the emotional labor for being the one who kept our dream alive long after he'd outsourced it to me. It was my severance pay. That's what I told myself. A payment for 6 years of my life. I transferred the entire amount to my personal account. The screen flashed success. And for a second I felt nothing. Then a wave of panic and regret washed over me so strong it made me sick. I knew what I had done. I knew it was wrong. But it was done. His text started a few hours later. First confusion, then pure rage. He called me a thief. A liar. He said he was going to destroy me. I blocked his number, my heart pounding in my chest. I spent the next day in a daze, alternating between crying and feeling this horrible, defiant anger. I didn't know what he would do, but I knew it wouldn't be pretty. This morning my phone rang. It wasn't him. It was my dad. His voice was quiet the way it gets when he's not just angry but deeply, truly disappointed. "We need to talk," he said. "Mark called me. He told me everything." My stomach dropped. "He told you everything?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Of course he had. He'd told my father times, his times, everything. "Get dressed. You're coming over to the house now," he said, and hung up. There was no room for argument. The drive to my parents' house was the longest 15 minutes of my life. I rehearsed what I would say. I would explain the loneliness, the year of feeling like a ghost in my own life. I would talk about the emotional labor, the wedding I planned alone. I wouldn't try to excuse taking the money, but I would give it context. I thought I was going to have a difficult conversation with my dad. What I walked into was an ambush. I opened the front door and saw them all sitting in the living room like a jury. My dad in his armchair, my mom on the edge of the sofa, looking terrified. And across from them, Mark. He wasn't alone. He'd brought his parents. They all looked up at me as I walked in their faces, a mixture of stone-cold anger and pity. I felt like a child who had been called to the principal's office. The air was so thick with tension I could barely breathe. My dad just pointed to the empty chair next to my mom. "Sit down." Mark's father started, but my mom cut him off. "Mark, what she did was wrong," she began, her voice shaking, but trying to be strong. "But you have to understand what she's been through. She has been so lonely this past year. Planning a wedding by yourself while you were busy. It takes a toll." She felt abandoned. It was the wrong thing to say. I could see it on their faces. Mark's mother scoffed quietly. To them, my mom's words didn't sound like an explanation. They sounded like a childish excuse. It just made me look spoiled and weak, as if loneliness was a good enough reason to steal thousands of dollars. My mom was trying to defend me, but she was just digging a deeper hole for us both. Mark held up a hand, calm and collected. He was in his element. This was a business negotiation now. "I understand you're upset," he said, "not to me, but to my father. I am too. We can talk about feelings later. Right now, I just want to resolve the issue of the money." He pulled out a folder. Inside were neatly printed bank statements. He had highlighted every single transfer he'd made into the wedding account since we opened it. He had dates, amounts, everything. Cold, hard facts. He wasn't there to talk about the 6 years we spent together. He wasn't there to understand why I was heartbroken. He was there to collect a debt. My total contribution to that account, he said, his voice flat and even, was $4,823. The rest was from her contributions and a little bit of interest. He passed the statements to my father. My dad, a man who understands numbers better than he understands emotions, studied them for a long moment. I watched my entire 6-year relationship get reduced to a ledger sheet in my father's hands. Every sacrifice I'd made, every tear I'd cried, every lonely night erased. All that mattered were the numbers on that page. Mark even took out his phone. You can log into my bank app on your phone if you want to verify it yourself, sir. It was the ultimate humiliation, proving my theft to my own father on his own phone. My dad didn't even look at me. He just nodded slowly and handed the papers back to Mark. "She'll pay you back," he said. "All of it. The 4,800. He couldn't even say the full number. I'll work out a payment plan with her. You'll get your money." And that was it. Case closed. The tribunal had reached its verdict. Mark had won. He had proven I was a thief, and in doing so, he had completely ignored the reason I'd done it. My family saw it too. They didn't see a woman who had been driven to a desperate, stupid act by a year of emotional neglect. They just saw the numbers. They saw the crime. Mark and his parents left shortly after that. There were no goodbyes. The car ride home with my parents was silent. It was a horrible, heavy silence, worse than any shouting match could ever be. When we got to my apartment, my dad turned off the car, but didn't make a move to get out. "I don't even know who you are anymore," he said, staring straight ahead at the windshield. "We didn't raise you to be a thief." "Dad, please," I begged, tears finally streaming down my face. It wasn't about the money. He left me. He was gone for a year, and he just expected me to wait and plan a party. "I don't want to hear it," he cut me off. "You can feel however you want to feel. It doesn't give you the right to take what isn't yours. You embarrassed me. You embarrassed your mother. You embarrassed yourself." I was left with nothing to say. He was right about the act, but so wrong about the cause. He had agreed to a payment plan. He would pay Mark directly every month, and I would pay him back. I was a 8-year-old woman, put on an allowance by her father to pay back the man I was supposed to marry. The weeks that followed were the loneliest of my life. My relationship with my parents is strained. We talk, but it's different. There's a wall of disappointment between us that I don't know how to break down. They look at me and see a liability, a problem they had to solve. And the online guy. It faded just as Mark said it would. Once real life came crashing down, the fantasy of our little online world couldn't hold up. We stopped talking a few weeks after the intervention. He was a symptom of my loneliness, a temporary fix for a much bigger problem. He was never the point. The point was the emptiness Mark left behind. I know I was wrong. I know taking the money was a stupid, impulsive, and illegal thing to do. I live with that regret every single day. I'm paying the money back. And I'm paying for my mistake in a dozen other ways too. But I'm not the villain he painted me as. I'm not a cold, calculating thief. I'm just the woman who spent 6 years building a future with a man only to be told that my time, my effort, and my heart weren't worth as much as the numbers on his bank statement. He took my future, so I took the money. We both know we can never get either of them back.